It will be self as well.
Is that all 8 committees doing that in that same meeting? Is that accurate?
In fact, we were told that the time and place would vary depending on the number.
Gotcha.
Right there, I know. But
Monday.
Straight back? Straight back. And to the left.
Okay, straight back into the left. Yeah, so it's in the side. It's convenient. You want to give you a hard. Okay, everyone have a good lunch. Hopefully no one had pasta. Because they know that does to you. Yeah, makes you good sleepy. Okay. I'm sure you have all seen it, but there's a date set for the first public hearing, October 27th, 11 a.m., State Boardroom in this building, first floor. Kim said that the location could change and maybe even the time could change. The date could change. You know, that's just kind of how things go. But anyway, as of today, that's what we know. So, okay. So we left off just having conversation about the graduate outcomes. We were adding some things to our list. Was there any other items that you want to note on this list before we move forward? I have a question, I guess. I wouldn't want to just put necessarily in a graduate outcome, but when I think about under reading that students or that graduates demonstrate stamina when required to read long or challenging texts, one of the things that I'm wondering is, does that imply, and I think maybe it does, that they have the problem-solving skills necessary or the coping skills necessary to get through the text? Because I feel like one of the things that definitely happens when students leave K-12 education is that things are not leveled for them anymore, you know, and so I need to be able to figure out how to, when a text is too hard for me to navigate it, and I would say that, you know, sometimes I have the opportunity to not read it because it's too hard for me. Like, for example, I got in the mail one time, like you may be part of a class action, whatever, where you get 25 cents because there's so many people. And I was trying to read it just so I could feel like I knew what was going on, and I just quit because I was like, I don't care. I probably won't actually get anything out of this. It would be 25 cents, and that's really all I need to know. So I could let that go. But when it comes to something else more important, I need to be able to figure out how to get through it, whether it's, you know, something that's legal or whatever. So anyway, I'm assuming it's implied in there, but I just wanted to kind of get some feedback on that.
I think it is.
Okay.
I think it is implied there.
Okay. All right. So I think what I heard earlier was that we like the graduate outcomes with the changes we kind of made to them. And that one of those changes would be that we agree that the metacognitive pieces that we have identified are really important, but they're probably not something that we would use as a litmus for standards going forward. Is that correct?
Not ELA standards.
For
they
ELA.
would be embedded in a lot of standards.
Right, I'm sorry, yes, specifically ELA standards as we look at ELA standards. Okay. So does that sound about right? Okay. Okay. So that's that. Okay. The next the next item on our agenda is to review the work we did with the standards last time we met. So on the 23rd, well, I guess on the 22nd, we had decided that we would look at a couple different state standards. We said we would look at Massachusetts and South Carolina, and we would look at Missouri. So that's what we did. On Tuesday, we took some time to peruse Massachusetts standards, and then we charted together. We did a plus delta, what we like and things that we think could be improved upon or we don't like so much. So we charted that. We did the same thing for South Carolina. We did the same thing for the Missouri Learning Standards. So what you have in your handout is the chart converted to a document. So I think for those who, again, were not here, and then for all of us who maybe need a refresher, I'll take a few moments to go back through the information we have here. Paper copy of this, the Massachusetts, if you want those. While you're looking.
Or South Carolina, sorry. South Carolina. Did you mention South Carolina?
Like it.
And Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Massachusetts, we have a few.
I have that, man.
Yeah.
I like their words there, and their palm trees.
But really, there's a lot of them is curriculum framework rather than just standards.
So how is Massachusetts different? I mean, just in its.
That's kind of
Oh,
what we
just
tried.
the-
That's what we tried to do.
Gotcha.
But
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Who needs more time? No one? Okay. Well, so the idea was that we probably should, revisit our thinking originally, right? So we did that, and then also to make sure that those who weren't here had a chance to see kind of the thinking that we did, and after a little bit of side conversations we've been having here, one of them was, what we did was we really just said what we like and don't like. So if it indicates something's missing, it was we didn't like that it was missing from those standards. So that was what we said in the room. So anyway, that's what we have. I don't know if you want to have any discussion about it. Do you want to have a discussion about it?
I mean, does anyone have anything to add to the notes we've already compiled? There were several people that weren't here.
I think maybe for the people that weren't here, maybe just go over real quick how we decided to do what we did, and what we're using as our basis.
We decided to do like how we decided
Well,
to
I
do
mean-
this.
Yeah.
Can I just ask like this question for me?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you have all these different standards. Did you guys like do this all having knowledge? I mean, is this what you compiled last time?
Yeah, so the process we used last time was we had those 3 different documents you have. We took about like 30 minutes to read, peruse through them, and then we had a conversation about them.
Okay.
The
I think they were all
K-5
suggested by different people.
The
Like,
K-5
maybe
people
suggested
suggested
Massachusetts.
Okay, that's the first I heard of that.
Say what?
They said K-5.
Yeah, they said they were looking at Massachusetts,
Yes.
so we said we should
Okay.
probably look at what they're looking at,
Yes.
and yeah.
South Carolina.
And then the reason I believe K5 suggested Massachusetts was they talked about the Fordham Institute did a study on like
Yeah.
standards pre-Common Core, and so then at some point someone in the group suggested, well, South Carolina was another one
Sure.
that looked
Yeah,
fulfilled.
they had a
So that's
good
where
grade.
that kind of came from. So yeah.
With
Fordham had a good grade.
Right, yes,
But
based on,
yeah.
Yeah.
but we didn't like,
We didn't like
we
the
were like, that's not a good grade.
Deserved that.
Yeah.
We like aces of it.
That is true, that
South
happens.
Carolina.
So, yeah, so we spent about, 20 minutes reading, and then we spent however much time in conversation, about them, and then it was kind of like a consensus base, like we said, I don't like this, and yeah, I don't like it either, I do like that, that was what went on the chart. Charts are over here in the corner, if anyone likes to see them, and I know we have pictures of them as, well, I think we have pictures of them, yes, we have pictures of them as well. So, I mean, it's almost word for word, in fact, almost a little too much, almost word for word. I thought, well, probably could have made that a little nicer, but I didn't, I just wrote what we wrote, so. So anyway, that was our process, and just to get a feel for what else is out there.
I think it was also noted that the Massachusetts standards are no longer used by Massachusetts.
Well, that's because Common Core replaced them. That's the only reason.
Right. But
Right.
they were written, 13 years ago.
Well,
Yeah, we
they,
used the 2001.
they actually did come up with a set in, right before Common Core came in, but they were kicked to the curb because Common Core was brought in. So they were pretty much finished with them, but Dr. Stotsky finished her draft, and she's got a watermark on it, you can find it online. So, which were probably going to be, fully adopted until their governor signed off on Common Core, so.
And the South Carolina standards also were given in 2008.
Yeah,
So these were all pre-Common Core.
Right, and those dates are noted at the top of the documents, too, the years are.
And another thing that we need to make note of is when we were discussing these, we kept looking at what we had on those charts as a basis for our discussion. So we had brainstormed those characteristics, and we were using those for our basis for just comparison.
And the whole point of the exercise, right, last time, the idea was what framework do we want to use as a starting, like you said, there's hundreds of standards in each of them, they're organized differently. A lot of the content is still the same, although it may, certain standard frameworks emphasize more than others, but the idea was just, we want to look at a wide variety of frameworks that are out there so that we can pick the one we think is the best starting place, and then we can get kind of down and dirty with the actual standards. And I believe, is that the agenda, is that what we're hoping to achieve by the end of the day?
Yeah, because I think we decided, or we discussed, we didn't decide, we just discussed that starting from scratch, is probably not smart, because, every state has reading, writing, language standards, maybe speaking and listening, depending upon the state. Some of them we noted that were varied within their standards, but every state has standards like that, so if we could, you know, determine what we want to use as our foundation and then add and subtract from there, that would make sense rather than trying to write standards from scratch, because that's, well, as fun as that would be, it'll take a really long time. So, okay, so is there anything to add to what you have here that you feel like we didn't capture last time?
Well, we could have probably drug this thing out without them.
Oh, for sure.
I think it is what it is. It just shows what we worked on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. So, at this time, what I am wondering is, are there any other state standards that we need to be looking at? Of course, noting that, again, every state will have reading and writing language standards. They probably look a little bit like this. What's that?
Just 47.
Oh, goodness. I don't want to do that, but if that's what you guys want to do, we can certainly do that.
Well, I talked about Texas on our thread, and because I don't think they ever signed up for Common Core.
No.
No, they didn't. But when I got into it, I didn't like it. It was huge and wordy and hard to follow.
Okay.
I do have a question about the House Bill 1490 itself. It's Section A, lines 2, 3, 4 say, a rule and regulation consistent with provisions contained in Section 160.526. The State Board of Education shall adopt no more than 75 academic performance standards and establish knowledge, skills, and competencies, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, are we then necessarily limited to, nobody has told me anyway, maybe somebody else knows this, how many standards are to be attributed to each different subject area, for example, because we've got social studies.
I think I can answer that. That aspect of the statute refers to the Show Me standards, like that, and that is untouchable. Like, we have not been charged with messing with that. We've been charged with essentially coming up with the new GLEs or CL, the grade level expectations.
So that's the 75.
Course level expectations.
Right, that's the 75.
This is the 75 right
Actually,
here.
73.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
we can add 2 more.
And our committee is supposed to recommend the specific learning
not add
standards
those
for each grade level within English.
Well, when it says the state board shall adopt no more than 75 academic performance standards, I was part of the group that did this years ago. That's already done. So somebody explain to me.
Yeah, I think, so later in the bill, and then mine's not page numbered, so I apologize. It's about the middle, like
13, number 2.
section, where I'm getting at number 9 is really where it gives us our job as a committee. It reads it's like a number 9, and it says by July 1st, 2000, or that part's not relevant, it's been stricken, but in establishing, evaluating, modifying, and revising the academic performance standards and learning standards, it's the learning standards that we're charged with working with, authorized by section blah, blah, blah. The State Board of Education shall consider the work that's been done by blah, 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 blah.
Nick, can you fill us in sort of what more?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's on the 7th page.
I know, mine's missing.
It's on, yeah, it's,
I don't have a line number on there.
I don't have line number.
Yeah, it's page 7.
It's page 7, and then there's a number 9 that starts the paragraph, like it says 9 dot.
160.
By July 1st, 2006, the State Board, that part is no longer relevant because it's in brackets, but at the number 160.526, the section number of that. I'm not going to just read it out loud again if people are having a hard time finding it.
Just read it.
In establishing, evaluating, modifying, and revising the academic performance standards and learning standards authorized earlier in this bill, the State Board of Education shall consider the work that's been done by other states, recognized regional and national experts, professional education discipline-based associations, other professional education associations, the work product from the Department of Higher Education's Curriculum Alignment Initiative, or any other work in the public domain. So that's what we've been charged to do.
Okay,
is
then
the-
explain to me why the beginning of the bill says an act to repeal sections 160.514, 160.526, et cetera, et cetera.
Where are you reading that?
I'm at the beginning
Sure.
of the bill.
The statute previously existed, and this was making modifications to it. And so all of those little numbers that have been repealed are the parts of the bill in brackets that they pulled away, and then what's in bold is what is the new language that was introduced by the bill. So like, for example, this was the same statute that back when these were developed, this was the same statute that defined that 75 to begin with. But what's changed about it is the whole process by which these work groups are created. So again, like on the very first page, next to number 2, it says, whenever the State Board of Education develops, evaluates, modifies, or revises academic performance standards or learning standards, it shall convene work groups composed of educational professionals to develop and recommend such academic performance standards or learning standards. And then it goes into the minutia of there will be this many groups, this is how the groups are appointed. But what the State Board has done is they've convened, right, for the bill, because later in the bill it also requires that they convene these groups right now by October 1st of 2014. But what our work is, right, the State Board has convened us to provide a recommendation to them for the development, evaluation, modification, or revision of, in our case, the English 612 learning standards.
Because the statute didn't require work groups before.
Yeah.
Well,
Which
I'm
is
just-
what, at all.
Okay, because I read that to be moving forward in the future when they
And it's-
convene groups, but I'm looking at page 13, line 11, where I was told this pertains to our work, and it said, work groups shall develop and recommend academic performance standards to the Board of Education by October 1st, 2015.
Correct.
Report it, so it's not all that others, it just says develop and recommend, and I was under the understanding that all that other stuff that's up on the wall was meant for future groups moving forward if the need should ever arise. So is there?
It's both. So I mean, it creates, like you said, it forces this group right here this year to be created to do this work, and then it also sets up henceforth anytime they were to revise the standards moving forward, this is the same process by which you would need to use.
Yeah,
So we're like
so
the
it's-
pioneers,
yeah.
essentially. This is the
So those
first time.
standards can't be adopted
being
again
used.
without work groups being involved.
Well, we were speaking of close reading, and I'm just going to say that my understanding of this, and I am not a writer of legislation or any kind of authority on legislation at all, so I'm just saying this is my own reading, is that when it says point blank, this is an act to repeal these sections, and then the part that's bolded, and there's an explanation at the bottom of page 1 about the part that's bolded, tells me that we are to be doing what's in the bolded part, that the other parts, and it identifies them by number, are repealed.
Only what's in brackets.
Well, what is in brackets is
Right, in
repeal,
brackets.
and what is bold is what is new.
New, replaces.
Exactly, and so
And
when we
affects
look at the
those-
bolded,
It affects those sections.
Right.
right, and the most of the last few pages is bolded, that's what we're doing. It seems, or supposed to be doing this. I just thought maybe we should clarify that before we go any further.
Okay.
So, am I to understand then, Maridella, that on your 160.526, in establishing, evaluating, modifying, and revising the academic performance standards and learning standards, are you saying that we are to use the current Missouri State learning standards as our start point? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the current Missouri learning standards, the ones that were voted into law in 2010, and then this law that asks us to review those was signed, I believe, by the governor in July.
Well, yeah, but the governor signed us off on Common Core in 2010, not June 25th, and they weren't voted upon. No legislative official voted on them, no parent reviewed them. They were just, he signed a memorandum of understanding and committed our state to them.
And I think that's the reason that what we see on page 1, for example, which refers to this stuff, is not bolded. That's what I'm trying to, that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you just want to make sure we are not touching those
Right.
things, yeah.
Right.
Right. which as I was whispering to Jill earlier, was that if we were to add 2 more, because we can't have 75, she's giving us more work to do, which
Right, right.
But, I mean, to Jill's point, you're right. I mean, the bill gives us the ability to completely overhaul. I mean, it doesn't give us the ability to do anything. It gives us the ability to recommend to the state board what we think they should do.
And they'll do it anyway.
But we can completely overhaul. We can borrow and use standards from other states, like what we're kind of looking at, or we can keep what we have. And all of that is within our purview as a committee, and that's what, we're charged to do and think about.
Well, I don't think we can keep what we have, because I think that's the whole point of 1490 is to not keep what we have, because the parents and the public in the state of Missouri, by and large, are supportive of this bill and are hoping that we're going to write our own standards. At the end of the day, that's what they hope our work product is. Standards that are written, that are not copyrighted, that are not Common Core.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think that's a discussion we need to have, but legally speaking, we do have the ability to keep it. I'm not saying we should. I think that we're not at that point in the conversation at all, but the bill itself gives us the ability to keep or overhaul or completely throw out and start over.
So I guess I have a problem because I kind of feel like if the intent of the bill and press releases I see coming out from like the person who appointed me was that their office, didn't like Common Core. And so I just feel like we shouldn't even be starting with that as a base, if that's the intent, because then I feel like I'm not doing my duty as my appointment.
To be fair, though, I don't know, that was the intent of the original bill, but the bill that got passed, that was not the intent. Senator Sylvie, when it was being debated in the Senate, Senator Sylvie, when it was being debated in the Senate, right, proposed an amendment to this bill that would explicitly forbid us as committees from using Common Core or the State Board of Education from using Common Core, and that amendment was knocked down at a vote of 29-2. So if that was the intent of the bill, that was the ability for them to put it in the bill and make sure that that happened. And that was not voted on by our legislature. And that was a bipartisan vote, right? 29-2 voted not to put that language into the bill.
So I think the intent is really, from what I have read, is that what happened with Common Core in 2010 was that it was adopted without this kind of structure in place to review the standards, to bless the standards, to say we'd like to add to. Other states did do that. They convened work groups, they looked at them, they added to them, they took away from them, they did whatever, if they adopted them at all. And ours did not. And so that, I think, is why we see that whole revision to this whole statute, because the statute before did not allow for that. It was just whatever the state wanted to put into place, put into place. And so now we're here to make sure that whatever we do put into place, first of all, I think has our blessing, comes from us who are experts in children, and also meets the criteria that we've established for ourselves for outcomes for our graduates. So regardless of where we start, I think that was the purpose behind the bill, was to say that there's not one entity that's going to hand down the standards. They need to come from the educators and from parents. I personally think that there should be some students here, but that wasn't included in the bill. So anyway, so my question before was other states to look at. Were there any others?
Well, we had Indiana 08, I guess, was our homework.
Right. So do we need to, we probably need to look at those. Do we have a copy of those? We didn't have a paper copy. That was something we decided at the end of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did get emailed out though, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did. Yes. Yes, to everyone.
You can go to who does not, I was going to say technology-wise, who has access to something.
I can pull up my computer, pull out my computer.
That's true. We could just project. Well, that doesn't lend itself well to browsing, but I mean, we could project them.
It doesn't work.
Do you have the website?
And I want to make sure that I'm on the right one, right? So Casey, check me on this, right? Is this the Indiana's Core Standards Spring 2008 Final Draft?
Are you on ELA?
No, I'm not.
ELA
That's
is
not.
red.
Okay, let's see if we can find that.
Where did you
For some reason, it's really hard to find now. You used to be able to click on it from the Fordham report, and that's been taken down. So
It's in the email that Tori sent us.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Give me just a second.
because
Here it is. It's www.in.gov/edrouandtav.
Want me to write it down?
/file /
Email it out there.
yeah, the spring '08 one is the only one that's popping up today. The summer of '08 is actually the published one. But
Final draft spring '08. This one says.
there's a summer '08 version too that was finalized, I guess.
I'll email the link to everybody
Okay, did you find
right
it?
now.
Thank you. Nick, did you find the one you needed?
Yes, I think
Okay.
between Nancy and I, we've got it in theory.
But it's the spring.
Oh, here it is. Or so this says here.
They probably just found a few typos there. The difference between spring and early.
Will you email it to me, Nick, so that I can put it in the notes?
Yeah.
So just know which
I am
one to look at?
just
Thank you.
replying all to
So you haven't
the
changed?
last.
Okay.
An underscore.
He's gonna send an email on the
Somebody
I couldn't find it, I didn't get that you got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, I did. I just find it.
I didn't see it.
That works.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't blame
I ran out of paper last night. Didn't have time to get more.
Is it this one?
Yeah, it's red, it's supposed to be red, I think. We're in silence. Yeah. Does anybody have an extension cord? Any extension cords?
Jen, will this get you, because I don't need to plug in right now, I've been plugged in. I'm fine. And that would give you 4 to 6 feet.
I Google Indiana standard SPLA. 2009.
They kind of look like
Yeah,
this.
standards.
They all look the same, the
Yeah.
colors are
Yep, that's it,
different.
yes.
I am about to send the link. It's just taking forever.
Okay, thank you.
A little challenge locating information.
Yeah.
I have a link, if you don't need to send it.
Oh yeah, if you're ready, go for it. Do
Take
you
it.
have the? Sweet.
I'm gonna plug them into this.
No, that sounds very good.
Anybody else?
If you need to use it.
Right.
Okay. If you need to.
Like it doesn't go in. Mine, like things I send, if I go back and look for it, and it's supposed to be 90 days. Are you using Google?
Right.
You now have the link on your email.
And when I go in and look on here.
Does anybody need, I'm happy to share an iPad with someone
Carrie, do
and
you
off
Stacy,
somebody's shoulders if anybody needs it.
Somebody can use my device if
My
they want.
name's Stacy
While they're
Shore,
looking.
STACY, Shore, SHORE.
Here's Carrie's CPS treatment. Would anybody like my iPad? I'm happy to share. We'll borrow Linda's computer screen if I'm not sharing both of you. No. I looked, had a chance to look at them
Yeah, that
in
way.
the off season a little
It's
bit.
Grable
Hey,
too.
Nick.
GRAB. Could you come over here and see?
Yeah, something technical.
Do you just want to, you want me to pull this up for you? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, yeah, I was gonna. All right, are you gonna go through the internet?
Yes.
Okay, you get your pen.
Mind if I wing your grass?
Jill, it kicked back yours.
Oh, that's because I put it in the wrong way and you used my email. It is, there's no period between SBC and which is where I put the period.
JILL Noble, no period, at SBC Global.
Let's do ELA.
No, that would help with it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Did we look over all 6 through 12, or did we break it into everyday work at 6 through 12? They're all, okay.
So my assumption is that what we will do is we're going to synthesis of like what the MLOs would be, right? Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah.
My guess is that these are the actual like MLO. Where do we get those?
Well, I would say there's a couple of ways that we've known in the past year. We've had quite a bit of
Right. Or maybe I would argue it's a little more restrained. I mean, right. I mean, if you look at, it's almost like they've specified it seems like. Right, but they took away. So they really like, so rather than writing it as MLS, can you look at like, go like 5, 6, or 6, I want to go through and look at what kind of progression I have between those. Oh, you guys are doing good work.
As much as we can, and orders look like ours. We'll have that this year. And next year, I don't even know how that will look like forever. So, yeah. But anyway, so my assumption would be, and I think that most of them is going to honestly, so I would write that. But then that's kind of what we're ready to understand. But that we would write that.
But you know, yeah. That really helped, you know, because
Well, and then I was saying, let's think about and we had the GLE. Remember when the library this year, the GLE, where they take you, because he's so good. He says, where is he? And when you get a chance to go back to stay on, there is too broad, you know, and how did you know, so, you know, I know that we certainly felt like we were checking on it. Did I hit it? Did I hit it? And then like, feeling really well, the kids kept asking me to look around there.
I know.
I love the kids right there. I know, I'm always going to you know, I get it.
Yes. And she's a.
I got what I needed, but if you want, it's good for you.
As much as I can. I'm sorry, I'm really working on that thread over here for. Oh no, I'm on now. It's just a slow process. Everything has to load. Well, it's even the computer. Like, you know, it's like, yeah, the computer's just to get logged on. And then when you get logged on, then it's like, now all the applications load. So, and then now I'm just accepting it.
So what we're missing are the indicators from that document. There's 90 total MLOs, that those statements summarize. And I really like the summaries. I think that's a really cool way to, and succinctly tell you that, and they are vertical progressing, which I like, but It's a little misleading, like it's not just these are the entities.
That can't be right.
2014 Indiana standards.
That's why I was asking you, Jen.
That's what I looked at.
Those are the ones that were slightly modified.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, but they actually have pieces that,
Right.
and they've taken, they consider
all of your fine arts
yes, and they wrote it in Massachusetts, Nebraska, so they look at all of those and they put them together. So, and it's really well done. So,
Okay.
you know, they have all the pieces, there's the standards. The 2014 version, yes. 2014 version. That's what I looked at. And the indicators are very exciting. So you don't need any indicators in 2014. In other words, if you look at the 2014 version of the Indiana standards, there are no indicators.
And she said, let's take a read.
They're inside
It's
of
all
them.
like.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it looks more like.
It looks really unusual. It's they're great organized. It's just like they have 6 through 12 on one page. Yeah, they're organized really. 2014 Indiana. Yes. That's the one.
I was disappointed that we didn't have these meetings because can you imagine how the discussion would be if we had talking about what you're discussing for graduation?
It's based on the National Council of Teachers of English, Massachusetts, Common Core, and Nebraska. And there were committees that studied.
Yeah, she's gonna say.
Well, they had committees that studied and they put the best success from all of these things together.
That's how it was, you know, but, so is it English language, you know, I just think I should sometimes.
Yes, yes. And they had committees of people.
We've been trying to
review
do
those.
Okay.
So she's leaving me to go now?
Yeah, those are the ones.
Set up.
Okay.
A lot of them are very cool. I know.
And they can
Yes.
This has got the guy, and one of the.
If you guys look at, also on that Indiana site, if you click on the link that says,
What did you say, Lindsay? I'm sorry.
so we went to the 2014 Indiana standards. And if you look at,
Well, they revised it.
if you're on that, right, the link that says English language arts standards correlation guide, I can send this link to it myself. It's a PDF. It lists their standards that are current, their standards from 2006, the Common Core standards, and then differences from previous standards.
Right.
So it tells you how they're different from Common Core. It lists the Common Core standard, the 2006 standard, and what they are now.
Right.
Actually pretty interesting. I'll just send a link.
And it does say that they were comprised of several sources. It wasn't just taking Common Core and adopting Common Core. They went to several sources, and they had committees study those
They didn't have
standards.
to. Because of the.
And pick out the best of the best.
However they want to do. Right. 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 Right.
That's your platform.
Right.
15%, but the structure is a custom. That means it has to be. And I think it's so that's
If you notice that it is different, they go straight across. Yeah.
Right.
So there's each one of those.
If you belong to the consortium.
Right.
Well, but we don't agree with it anymore. Right now, but
We've not gotten
going
rid of
forward.
it. We've not gotten out of it.
But we will be going
That's how
forward.
much it's been. We've not gotten out of it. We've not gotten out of it.
Right, when we write our new assessments, we want to.
Yeah, from four, you're right. You're absolutely right.
But we can still use it, we just can't be, because you're part of the consortium, it has to be, because that's how you're being assessed. And so if you were to take it and change it, and then you use those assessments, then you are in big trouble, because you're not teaching what's being assessed. Yeah. So that, which is actually to your point, you know.
Comprehension and numeracy.
So much money.
It has everything.
What grades did you change?
All grades.
And what years do they mention first?
Well, they did down in the K through 5. What grade? K through 5. You're in
Are we ready to move forward?
Yeah, I was just about to write up their Indiana stuff, so that's okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna write up here like I did last time. Do you want this up there still? I know, I didn't right there. What shall we use? Okay. Okay, Indiana, spring 2008? Okay. I just assumed I would turn it again. I don't know if someone else would like the marker. No takers? Okay. All right, hit me. What do you like and
I'll
not
start
like?
with the rose and the torque. I really
Okay.
liked the way that it clearly synthesized, like for each strand, this is what a sixth grade kid should be able to do in reading literature or in writing research. However, it referenced about 90 indicators per grade level. Those indicators would be like what the actual learning objectives are, and the 90 part to me seems overwhelming. And I know that document didn't actually even let us see specifically like what those 90 skills are. So to me, it's a kind of a trade. I really liked the synthesis piece of it, but I think asking us to do 90 things in one grade level is excessive.
Unless you miss 26 days.
Per grade level? Or
Per grade level,
or per-
yeah. So like at a single grade level, when you looked at the indicators that were referenced in those 8 strands, there were 90 on average.
For some reason, I thought I heard you say strand at first, and I was like,
Yeah, there's 8 strands and
yeah,
then
that's
90 total
even
indicators.
more ridiculous. Okay.
Well, coming from a career tech ed background, I mean, they have that whole separate workplace skills standard, which addressed a lot of the technical writing issues that weren't addressed in others.
The one strong reservation I have with that is 8, it's the core standard 8. The workplace standard, is that what you mean?
Standard.
Which one
Okay.
is it?
Thank you.
The
Sorry.
core standard.
One reservation you have.
On the other side on
Mhm.
that is that when I read those, and they start at grade 9, they don't have them for 6 through 8.
The
They
workplace.
start at grade, that's right. Starts at grade 9, and when you read, without reading the standards indicators, when you just read the description, ask relevant questions of the speaker and make notes and responses, clarify purpose and audience. Okay, that, we have, those are in every other set of standards I've read. why they're separating them out as somehow workplace standards. Those are life standards.
So some of those sound like the oral communication standards that we
much all
had
of
talked
them.
about before.
The only thing
So,
added
but
is
do they
use
get
a
to the
computer,
do they
use a
get-
computer to design and publish documents, which I looked up which one that is. I have it written down somewhere in the Turbulent Missouri Learning Standards. That is multimedia presentation, standard 5 under speaking and listening. It's in the other standards as well.
Carrie, did you indicate that that one includes technical writing also?
Well, they also talked about interviewing skills, resumes, cover letters, reports, documents that are related to workplace things, which, and I agree with you, a lot of that is covered in everywhere else.
Yeah. It's more like, where do you put it in a class? Just what we brought up, and you weren't here last time, but we brought up keyboarding. Everybody agrees that if you don't know how to do that, that's probably gonna be a problem for you. So, but is that an English language art skill? That was our question. You see what I mean? Yeah. It is an important skill, but does it need to be specified?
Certainly one you need for testing.
It's when it is, absolutely, in any subject though. You see what I'm saying? That's a generic across the board skill.
The thing that I noticed is, I noticed that on some of the workplace skills and on some of the other skills, they weren't necessarily skills for success in the workplace. They, I didn't see a lot of multimedia involved, a lot of technology. So I think there was a lack of technology and multimedia.
Gina, is that across the board, or is that just in that workplace?
I pretty much saw it across the board.
Okay. Okay, other items, let's help us.
Another, and it's a rose and a thorn, I liked, especially compared to the Massachusetts and South Carolina standards, these were there was a vertical progression. Like if you looked from grade level to grade level, the skills were differentiated by grade level, which I think is a unique, extremely important thing. That said, it was hard to see that vertical alignment just because of the way the document was organized. So it was hard to really pick up on the nuances of what's different from 6 to 7 to 8. But I was refreshed that it was there because again, when we looked at Massachusetts, they sort of said like 6 through 8 does this, 9 through 10 does this, 11 through 12 does this. Sorry, have you told? I'm a gesturer.
I have noticed,
peeve.
yeah.
And in South Carolina, we didn't see that at all, right? They had sort of the same standard throughout.
This one is not,
It's just not user friendly.
Is
Like,
that 9 through 12?
or not.
We're talking about theme, like a universal theme.
Yeah. RL, what,
2.
Okay.
or
Because,
2, 1.
okay, 6 through 8 does not just cover that really well, I don't think.
Here.
A universal theme.
Just as a formatting recommendation, since these are electronic documents, why couldn't whatever we decide on in the end be both ways? Why couldn't we have all the strands for one grade level? You could read it that way,
Sure.
Right.
or you could see the vertical alignment. Why
Sure.
not?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. Make a mental note of that for later. If it's important. Okay?
I didn't see the rigor in as much, that as many spots as it needs to be, I think.
What does that mean?
Rigor,
Like, what do you mean you
like,
think the rigor in those spots?
analyze,
I don't like that meaning.
evaluate, synthesize.
The higher level skills aren't there as much.
They're basically
Right.
4 quadrants, at least in one of the things that we look at as far as.
So you feel like you're focused more on the.
Yeah, I saw it in places. I saw the rigor in places, but I didn't see it
Whereas you're
across the board in all strands.
things where you're really in that professional level. Whereas the A is.
It's usually in the words, like analyze, text, or if you want to do.
Formulate.
Yeah, instead of just name point of view. Usually it's more analyze, you look at it, you hold the things, and Other items?
It ties back to assessment. Like, it's like, if I'm asked to analyze something on a test, that's got a different standard than just like identify. It's like identify the metaphor in the sentence is different than analyze, like how the author's using the metaphor. That's what it makes sense.
Other items? Buses? Deltas? Indiana?
I don't like the fact that in the top grades, 10, 11, 12, they have a distinct core standard writing literary text, and when you read what it is, it's not about embedding narrative to make an argument or for any other purpose. It's about writing stories that have fine character set tone, which I'm not opposed to doing, but as a distinct out of page standard, that doesn't seem to me to be something we need for students at grades 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12. They definitely need to be able to write narratives, but not a literary text.
Okay, so.
As a separate student.
That was at a high school level or 10, 11, 12?
I think it was 9, 10,
9, 12.
actually.
Oh, it's 9?
Yeah, it's
It's
all of them.
It's
All
throughout.
of them, and my point is that
Oh, but at high
the top
school-
3 grades I don't
That
see
becomes
putting
less
time on
important.
that.
Yeah. Because I think, we talked about that last time, about how
Mhm.
difficult it is to get to that.
Because I think there's a place for language arts elective courses too, right? It's like
Right.
creative writing
Writing
absolutely
would
is
be
an
fine,
appropriate
but
course
not
for
as a-
students that want to learn to write literary text.
And
but
again,
it's
writing
needed for
narrative, yes,
everybody.
but not writing a literary text.
So can I ask this as a novice, as a parent, when we start to get into such like detailed aspects of a strand or a standard, is that not at some point, are we not making it harder on the teacher?
Yes.
You're
And I'm just-
also
and again, I'm
asking
just
teachers sometimes to do things they're not really trained to do.
Yes.
If we made all English language arts teacher candidates learn to do all of the things that are in these standards, maybe in school 5 or 6 years.
And I guess that's the thing is that we add layer and layer and layer,
Right.
but the problem is,
Right.
I believe truly that my children have amazing teachers. I'm just a big teacher fan. I really am. So I guess the hard part for me sometimes is that I think that if we get too in depth, I mean, a lot of the teachers my kids have their masters and their specialists, and they're amazing. But it's like we are holding their, we're pulling them into saying, you gotta do this, 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 and this. But I think that where I come from, and again, I'm totally in off with this, but it's like I trust my kid's teacher more than I trust, having to spell everything out for them line by line, because that's what they have their degrees
Well,
in.
and we had that conversation last time
But I
about
really
how
don't-
more is less, and we agreed that with the ones that had a large number of strands, this one has 8.
Yeah.
We had it as a plus if they had fewer strands, like Missouri Learning Standards has 5 strands.
I'm so glad
The
you didn't say
Massachusetts
that,
has 6.
Because
Yeah.
I'm just a plain old classroom teacher,
Absolutely.
that's all I've ever been. There's no such thing as a plain old.
No.
Yeah, there is, and there's one that hasn't been on a group, that
I just-
hasn't looked at
I
all
just
these.
think we can't tell teachers how to teach sometimes, and when we start adding the complexity of rigor and what that can mean to you and to me and to you, then sometimes I think that word can be so, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but synthesize, I know we can define it in terms, we can make this like 3 times as big as it is, but I think we also, when we have to keep in mind the writing standards, we have to have some element of trust for the teachers that are literally sitting there, and I trust them as a parent. And I think we have to exercise that trust in the way the standards look to some measure. And am I totally off base?
No, I think,
No, absolutely.
I think you're right about that. I think the only thing on the other side of that would be that as a teacher who is bound by accountability, I also want to know what it is you want me to teach.
Yes.
The other thing is that I also want to know, me and my job, that when I meet with all second grade teachers or all 10th grade teachers, that when we talk about this, that we're all talking about the same thing, as opposed to, well, I interpret it this way, well, I interpret it this way, now all of a sudden, now we have a real big problem because I have 3 teachers in the same building who are teaching something completely different. And depending upon who you get, is what you end up getting as a result as a student. So that's like the other side of that. That it has to be spelled out enough to eliminate that from happening.
There's a
Yeah.
fine line.
Right, and that 90, like that is where you get into, oh my gosh, I can only do so much.
Because,
So.
when the rubber hits the road is the assessment, right? So like if we have 90 standards, there are 90 possible things that can show up on that test, and you can't teach all of that as a teacher. That's why you're right, it needs to be simplified.
thinking here about all the PLCs I've been on and the different grade levels, and when we sit down and go through this, the thing I liked about Indiana was it's very teacher-friendly in the sense that it gave you your statement of what they expected, and then it had the indicators underneath. And I think sometimes when we pull out these documents and we're in a meeting and we're going around the room, I see people just shut down because of the way it looks. Like, I know, I mean, I hate to admit it, that they just kind of, it's overwhelming, and I'm looking at lines and lines of letters and numbers, and it's nice to have it broken out.
Just tell me what to teach, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and you know, especially now, I like how this is, I don't know, with regards to, you know, stating your objectives and what the kids need to be able to know and understand and be able to do. It just makes more sense, just the way, the wording, the flow, but that's my visual.
Seems like a lot of micromanaging to get too crazy with the standards, because if you give a teacher, you know, some elements, some parameters, of course, in the form of a standard, but then trust them to get into the rigor and give them more time because we give them less standards, I think we'll be helping teachers.
If you go back to what Carrie pointed out about people being advised to teach what the document looks like, when I see, for example, with the Indiana is across the board, the first standard is vocabulary concept development. I personally don't like that because to me, that's not, I mean, what is language? Language is structure and words. That's in everything. Why make that something separate? Because then what it invites teachers to do is give a lot of vocabulary lists. There are certain things, in other words, when people read these, as Casey pointed out, they're going to go to what is comfortable to them. And if they like to have students do grammar exercises, they love standards that list out a lot of specific grammar stuff that needs to be addressed, or particular vocabulary lists which mitigates against what you were talking about.
Well,
so that's what I see wrong with the multiple.
I agree. And as a parent, what I see is that where there's some kind of a disconnect is that if my kids don't learn spelling and grammar in their lower grades, then they can't have the writing ability or the freedom to have wings when they're older. And so that's where, you know, for me, again, at the very novice level, it's that we have to do a really good job of stair-stepping everything, because if they get to this level, you know, they don't know how to spell, or they don't, you know, they can't write, then it all is lost anyway, you know.
And I had a parent not that long ago, being the ELA and special coach 9 through 12, complaining that her 10th grader wasn't being assigned spelling. You know, we don't have time. And not to mention that there is this thing called spell check. You know, so but that's the problem with tuning.
So I'm going to take us back to Indiana. We're kind of living there, but let's go back to our chart. So any other pluses or any other deltas you'd like to add to that?
I'd like to build on Maridella's idea. I see the standards as what Maridella was pointing out as being very much like in silos. I don't see the integration across the strands.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. So we have Indiana, we've got Massachusetts, we have South Carolina, we have Missouri.
South Carolina.
I don't know, actually, I know I said Carolina, but what preceded that, I'm not really sure anymore. We're getting to that point. Okay, so I want to say that when we were together, we said after we've done this kind of work of looking at what do we like, what do we not like, we would do a comparison between what we said were our graduate outcomes, what we said, what those likes, dislikes, plus deltas, to see how does Massachusetts compare to our, or measure up against our graduate outcomes? How does South Carolina, how does Indiana, how does Missouri, so that we can get a feel for that. So let's talk about how we'd like to do that. I think it would probably be good to take, like, for me, it would be good for me to take those two things side by side and think about it for a minute before I talk about it. Yeah.
And I wonder if we just have an opportunity to narrow the field a little bit. I don't want to shut that down, but if there are certain, we have 4 that we looked at, right? If there are 2, let's say, that people across the board think are the better ones to look at, should we look at those 2? Or I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there for the group to think about. Or 3, or
Instead of 4?
or 4. I mean, we can look at all 4 of them too. I just don't. I mean,
I want to make, I don't really understand. So we're identifying a couple sets of standards that we want to use as a springboard for our new standards.
I think that's what we're doing. Or at least gives us an idea for, you know, I think I feel like I've learned a couple of things from looking at them. One, about structure of them. I know that we liked guiding principles in several of them. We thought that was a nice thing, so that might be something we would consider adding to standards. Like structurally, that I would consider that not to be so much a content piece, but more of a, you know, structural piece. We talked, how it's packaged. You know, also we talked about, I think we've identified several times progression, but then also looking at it 2 different ways. I think that's a good piece. That's a formatting piece that we don't even really have to worry about, I hope. I hope that's not us. So, like, we've looked at those kinds of things, but then there's also things that we've identified that they do things a certain way, like the South Carolina siloed all the genres. Was that right? Is that the one that did?
Massachusetts had like the 8 different literary genres.
Oh, it was Massachusetts that did that, and we didn't like how they were all separate, because that leads back to that I teach my poetry unit, I teach my short story unit, or whatever, as opposed to integrating.
I mean,
so
one way we could
it's
proceed, I mean,
informative.
there's a variety of ways we could proceed, right? I mean, we could, again, we as a committee can start from scratch and completely write new standards.
No, we cannot.
I'm not proposing that, I'm just saying that is an option. A second option would be to take one of these frameworks and use it as the blueprint by which then we say, do we like the standards that are in it or not? Do we want to add? Do we want to subtract? Do we want to use the bill language? Do we want to evaluate, modify, or revise the standards within it? That's my personal opinion, that we should do that latter approach, because I don't think we have the time, frankly, to start from the ground level up. But
well, I kind of like that what we've done is we've set ourselves up for, we've almost set ourselves up for doing that, taking something and saying, but what we really liked from this state was this.
Right.
And what we really liked from this state is this, and they did this better. And that's kind of a nice way to go about it, as opposed to, I don't know, looking at, I don't really know, as opposed to what, I'm not sure. I could actually formulate that thought before I start talking.
Last night, I knew that I had to take a look at Indiana standards for the day.
Okay.
So I got online and I Googled and I found Indiana standards, and I went through all the standards. And I was so impressed and I was so excited, and I thought these are absolutely just perfect. And I was looking at the 2014 standards. All right, but when I looked to see how they came up with those standards, they had committees that went through and they looked at Massachusetts, national teachers, the English teachers, National Council of Teachers of English, and Massachusetts and Nebraska, and they went through Common Core, and they took the best of the best, and they put them together. Now, I know they're lengthy, but it's had everything in there, and it seemed to me it'd be easier to start with something that has everything, that's organized in a clear way, and take out what you don't want, rather than try to add and make sure it's consistent.
And I think the Missouri Learning Standards do that. I think they cover the areas that we address in our instruction and that are aligned to all of the things on that list over there, with the exception of exclusively having as an exclusive section the metacognitive skills that Nick identified, which are embedded throughout, and I would say in every set of discipline standards. So I don't understand why we can't start with those, which is what I thought we had agreed to do at the end of our last meeting, but yeah, it said it was like that,
We
but
did.
whatever. Okay.
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we can bring in anything from the 2014 Indiana ones or NCTE ones or any others you want to go out there and grab. But it is going to be pretty overwhelming, and it may be because I'm old, and it would be overwhelming to me, and it wouldn't to anyone else. But I think it would be overwhelming to try to go out and explore a whole bunch of other standards at this point when we have a set that basically meet the criterion of comprehensive but nevertheless concise, well vetted, well stated, and then we can expand from there. That would be my recommendation.
We have an article, I have an article here on Indiana's new standards and how they fail to prepare for the STEM.
That's why I was shocked, because I thought, that's what I've been seeing around in Twitter sphere and Ed Week and everything, and I'm confused. They're calling it a mess.
Yeah, they are, because it says that you can't get to the trig or the pre-calc without the prerequisite knowledge learned in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, which is still missing from the Indiana's rebranded standards.
It's fortunate, but since we're in ELA, we don't have to worry about that.
Well, but we're nevertheless looking at a set of standards that have flaws in them because they just rebranded Common Core.
Well, but let's be honest.
Let's look at the
All standards have
2008.
flaws.
Let's look at the 2008 Indiana standards, which were also on the top tier of the top standards in the nation, as well as the Massachusetts standards from 2013, which never got to be adopted because Common Core was brought in.
I don't have
I'm
any
not-
problem starting with Missouri and bringing in whatever we want. I have some problems with the format.
I don't feel that we should start with the Missouri learning standards because they're Common Core, and that flies in the face of the spirit of this
first
bill.
thing we ought to do is relate them. They are the Missouri learning standards. And let's start with the idea that they're the Missouri learning standards and make them what we want them to be.
They're Common Core, they just renamed them.
I don't care what they are. We'll make them what we want them to be.
And Jill, you were here at the end of the last meeting, so you didn't, and as someone who is vocally against that idea, maybe if you tell us quickly what you would add to that negative side of the Missouri learning standards, so that when we move forward in addressing what we want it to look like on this piece of paper, what is it that you don't like about the core, so that we as a committee, as we move forward, can be sure to address those things?
Well, technically, the standards themselves, I mean, we can rewrite them, we can come up with our own set of standards, or we can borrow from Massachusetts and borrow from Indiana, but I think it's the intent. That's where I'm stuck on. I'm stuck on the intent of using Common Core when the vast majority of the parents in the state.
That's not what I'm asking you. What
Well,
I'm
I'm
asking you is
answering
if
your
we're going-
question.
But not really.
Well,
Because I want to know, what about these standards do you not like, that doesn't have anything to do with politics?
I think they're developmentally inappropriate.
Okay, like what? Because we're
Well-
talking about the ELA 6 through 12 standards. Let's look at them.
I'm talking about practical classroom implementation. The math is.
We're not talking about
that.
Okay,
I
the
agree.
reading
6 through
is,
12.
the reading is also developmentally inappropriate.
Okay, show us which one. Let's talk about it. Let's go there.
I don't.
Because we're not talking about reading lists, appendices, and that is specified in the bill itself. And we're also not talking about classroom implementation because that's taught curriculum, it's not standard.
That's curriculum.
So I want to back up her question with, I want to hear
So
what standard.
you said we're not talking about the appendices, why?
No.
Because the bill says.
Bill prohibits us from talking about appendix A, we can't use it.
And to be honest, here's the issue, is that when I look through the Massachusetts standard and the South Carolina standard about the things that we listed that we liked, I matched those up with Common Core standards.
So did I.
So,
They're all good.
I mean, I just don't want to get bogged down by the politics of it. If we are going to focus on that list, doing what is best for kids, if that's what we're going to focus on, and we're saying that we like this part, can we not be open-minded enough to say, there might be some things there that are worth taking out and saying, we like these. It is what is best for kids because it applies to that list. So if there are things that are really specific in the standards that you as a parent don't like, that you as a teacher don't like, for anybody in here, that's what we did the last time we met in the afternoon when you weren't here. So if there are things in there that you say, I don't like this standard because of this, we need to add to this list. And then we can move forward.
Well, it feels a little hijacked to me to start off with the standards that we're working to get rid of.
We didn't start out with that one thing, we barely talked about them at all. And it seems to me that if, going back to what Lindsay just said, I did the same thing. Somebody wanted to look at the Massachusetts standards, the 2008, somebody wanted to look at South Carolina. So we did that, and then we made our pluses. What in those do we like? And I did the same thing Lindsay did. It seemed to me that the implicit instruction then was to see how many of those pluses in those other two sets of standards were things that are actually addressed in the current Missouri Learning Standards. In the Massachusetts one, introduction to language strand includes discussion and presentation. Well, in the Missouri Learning Standards, that's in speaking and listening. Another one was specific standard for revision of writing. That's in the Missouri Learning Standards in the writing strand. Standards are by grade bands. That's the way the Missouri Learning Standards are. I mean, there's no need to go through all of them because everybody can read these. But if you go then and make the comparisons, which seems to be at least the implicit instruction here, you find that the South Carolina and the Massachusetts plus ones we came up with are all somewhere in the Missouri Learning Standards. So that just takes you back to, well, which standards do we want to eliminate or modify in the Missouri Learning Standards?
Well, I guess what I would suggest, this is just me, is that I feel like when we think about who we have in the room, majority of folks in the room have been working in and around those for a couple years, or at least a year now. So if there's familiarity there. So when we think about a document to work from, it might be helpful to work with something that we have familiarity with, and then to be pulling pieces from others instead of digging through one that we don't have familiarity with. Because at the end of what we do, what we all want is that. So whatever they end up being, and they will end up being the Missouri Learning Standards, and that is for, I'm just thinking about it for ease of time and to move forward. That's where my knowledge rests at this point, because that's, I had the GLE knowledge, but that's kind of gone. I know R2C and R3C, but I don't remember exactly what was in them anymore, because I don't have to. Thank goodness.
I'll speak to that if I'm allowed. I think, and I expressed on the very first day of our meeting, I think the way that the Common Core standards were adopted is inappropriate. I think the Obama administration coerced by dangling money, right? Race to the top grant money, by dangling waivers. It forced states, forced is a strong word perhaps, but it enticed, it coerced states into jumping right into this instead of having groups like this actually vet the standards. And I think that was inappropriate. But the reality is that happened, and they've been in place for years now. And in some districts, my own included, right, we've been using them for 3 years. And so for us to completely overhaul and start over, it is appropriate if we can make the case for why is that so significant. But if I go back to my teachers, the question they're going to ask me is, why are you wanting me to reinvent all of the assessments, all of the resources, everything I've been doing for the past 3 years? What is so much better about this new product that you're producing? And if we can answer that, I'm all for doing that. But if we can't, I agree with Carrie's point that let's start with what we have and make it better, as opposed to starting over.
I don't think it's any secret around the table who feels what way about the Common Core. My whole point in this is I want something that Missouri owns that's not copyrighted nationwide. And I never said that everything in Common Core is bad, dump it out. However, I am a firm believer that we as a state should own our copies. And I do ask for the respect of this group that I'm entitled to those beliefs. Just like I'm, I respect all the hard work that the districts in the state, trust me, I'm in one of them, and we've done this for 2 years now. And for me, though, this is just a matter of, I want to be able to say we own our standards.
can I make a suggestion? So I thought the exercises we've done so far have been really helpful. And I don't think we're necessarily at the point right now where this group is to make a decision about how we go ahead and what standards we start with. But I thought the conversation that was really starting to get to it, for me, was really helpful was when you all were talking about what happened in the classroom when it was too much. And what I would like to hear some more of around the table, and maybe we could just, that might help us get some clarity on where we're going, is, how do you specifically apply what you're given on a daily basis, and what are the pitfalls and the unintended consequences? So that when we do look at what standards we're evaluating, we're looking at what hurts teachers in the classroom. And this is as a mom, because I want my teachers to feel empowered. And I know my little girl learns differently than her best friend. And so how do you accommodate those things? And how can we maybe, I would love maybe just instead of having this conversation about what to look at and then take from, to get to the what we want, is to maybe have a little bit of a round table and then go back. Could we think about that if anyone's interested in doing that?
I'm just going to address something that you said, Nick. You say, show me the reason why, okay? Well, as a parent who's researched, statewide scores dropped in all subject levels, in all content areas, statewide, this year. So when you ask me as a parent, show me why, and you just said, many schools have been doing it and we don't want to abandon it, it does not look like it's working from where we sit as parents, because all day long you can tell me it's so good, but why across the board, all subject levels, statewide, the scores plummeted.
The scores in my district went up in ELA 6 through 12.
So that's statewide overall.
Okay, yes, but what you have to realize is some of us actually have instructors who are teaching to the standards. Others, and I think, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said it is just beginning to be worked on in your area. So there are going to be a lot of places where this is not very much in place yet. And so the places that have been working on it for 2 or 3 years have higher scores.
But our APR, again, was 95, and we just have barely touched.
But here's the other question I have, to what Casey said. When you understand the Federal Register of July 29th, 2009 says that if you belong to the consortium, the standards have to be identical across state lines. That's in the Federal Register.
That's not what it says.
So
the public license agreement from the national, I'll send you the letter. The national.
Can I talk, please? Can I please talk? It does say that the Federal Register of July 29th, 2009 says, and you can look it up right now, that the standards have to be identical, but you can add 15% content. That 15% will never be tested. And here's the point, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to argue about standards. I really don't want to fight about that. Really, what I hope to see is to empower our teachers in the fact that if we go into copyrighted standards that are owned by 2 private trade organizations that we've brought in, then we're going to take a test that, although you can contribute to, you don't even get to see what the questions look like, and you're going to be evaluated against that test. I believe we have to own something that is ours, so that forces us into this position that we have to also, in a process like this, that's transparent with cameras, we write our own tests. So as our teachers, because of the ESEA waiver, are being tied to these tests, we have to move away from standards that have a predestined test that's already set out there. That's the SBAC right now. The 27 states that belong to SBAC will take the SBAC that align to the Common Core. So I think that from where I sit, it's not that, I can't tell you, look through every single standard, say this one, they're all, every single one bad. That would be disingenuous. Truly disingenuous. But I think that if we can come up with an approach to say, let's make it ours, and that will beget that we have to also originate a new test, because it's critical for teachers. Their evaluations are going to be tied to that test. That's where, just for me, where I come from more than anything else. I'm sure there are good standards that can be extrapolated. I will never argue that. But from where I sit and understanding, my background is political science, and I get it. So understanding that the Federal Register is the law of the land. It is. So when you understand that component, and please look it up, because you can just type it in and it'll come up. But that's where we have to own something that's our own. And that's where it comes.
Okay, so I want to just kind of go back. I was thinking about what you said about having a conversation a little more about what do we want. So I've been thinking about that just now. Not that I haven't been listening, because I promised I have also. But I was thinking we identify what we want for students for that. Maybe what we need to do is think about what do we want for the standards. So we've looked at 4 sets now of standards that we that have decent grades or whatever that were brought to our attention. However you want to say that, whatever. So we looked at 4 sets of standards, and there were clearly things we liked about them and things that we didn't like about them. So I'm thinking maybe what we need to be thinking about now first, because I realize I haven't really personally done that. What would I like to see? How would I like them to look? What would I like them to tell the teacher? And if I'm a teacher, what would I like that to be? If I'm a parent, how would I like them to look? So maybe we need to start there. But I feel like for me, before I can actually engage in a conversation about that, I need a little time to think and reflect on that. Because I need to kind of go back into what did I like about these that we talked about last week, and think, okay, what is it that I really want from the standards? Because I think that we've already agreed what we want for our students. So, but now what I'm hearing is a little bit more about, well, what's going to be best for teachers? So we need to kind of think about that too, and I think that having an argument over where we start isn't going to help us out at all if we don't really know where we want to go.
Okay,
so,
and I also would like to add at this point that we need to distinguish. I realize, that a parent isn't thinking the way that a teacher does, and we definitely need to hear all the viewpoints, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But I know that I've been a writer for the inquiry research items for Smarter Balance. There's also PARC. It's not mandated what the assessment's going to look like based on what standards you pick. So I wanted to clarify that first. Okay, we're not buying a test when we set standards. You can pick what standards you want, and then you can create your own test to test those.
The problem is the test really dictates which standards and how you use the standards. I mean,
Standards dictate the test.
But the test, once the test gets out, it's going to tell you how you have to teach the standard in order for our teachers.
It's backwards design per principle. These standards dictate the test. Mary Adele is absolutely correct, right? It's not our purview to design tests, right? But the state of Missouri, right? I was going to say the state of Missouri can design its own test. Or it can choose to use a national. I know, but that's not the point. This is a standards committee. That is what we're looking at.
But the standards, though, you're going to be tested on the standards.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely right.
So it's the end in mind of the test.
The standards don't dictate that you have to use this assessment.
It is.
Yes, but what we're saying is, once the standards are established, then there are tests created, and you can buy tests.
You can make them.
You can make your own tests from scratch.
Missouri has always made their own.
Because here's the thing, let me ask this question. Because I've read and totally understand the memorandum of understanding that Missouri signed with the SBAC, okay? That's the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium. So, I mean, I've read the memorandum of understanding, and that is not how I understand that contract.
But that's not, we're here to make the standards, and then after those standards are made, we could do whatever we want about the test.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Yeah, I think maybe we were talking about 3 different things.
And then the curriculum comes out of that.
Okay, we're on the same page. I got you.
Okay, so how do you feel about that, about thinking about what do we want for the standards before we go any further?
I think that's a good idea.
No, I mean I'm thinking about I'm thinking almost like going back to almost a plus delta again and saying, what do we want and what do we not want? Like I know in the standards I want a progression. That's me. I really love that I can read almost the same standard. That's one of the things I love about the way the Common Core was written, is that it starts, like I can clearly see the building blocks, and my teachers can clearly look forward to see how they can extend and backward to see how they can remediate. And I think that needs to be something that is in place to help out, and it also helps out the curriculum person, just saying, with vertical alignment. But which would be, but I'm not, that's just that. But I like that part, so like, that would be for me something that I would want to see. But, something I don't want to see is I don't know.
Several of the standards, even the Indiana ones we just looked at, we saw that progression. So I appreciate that, and I think that's a good idea.
Well, because I'm thinking there are things in all of them that I like, that I would like to see us say, these are the things, so that when we actually go to write standards, they follow whatever we say we want the standards to do. Yeah.
And I want to see an integration across strands.
Okay. So I'd like, but like I said, I'm gonna need a few moments. Like I can't just, I need to go back into my charts from the other day, if that's okay. I need to take some notes for myself. I need to reflect on a couple different things. Like I'll reflect on what did standards do for me, the GLEs do for me as a teacher. What did they do for me as a curriculum person? What do they do for my districts? Like I'll be thinking those things. So whatever that looks like in your world, I would think that maybe I'm not going to tell you what to think. You can think about shopping later or something. I don't know. Hopefully you'll think about this a little bit. So how much time do we need to do that? We need 10 minutes. I don't need too long, because otherwise I will start thinking about what I did about their grocery store.
10, and then if we need more, we can always extend it.
Yeah, that's what'll happen. 10 and then check back in, see if we need more time. Okay. Full transparency, I will also be using this time as a break.
Is this individual reflection? Or?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Or a bathroom
break.
Potty break.
Stacey, I so appreciate your sharing.
I'm just you know what, I just feel like.
You're never just mom.
Our teachers.
No such thing as an ordinary mom.
But I know I'm not you guys, but I appreciate, you have no idea, teachers in my kids' lives have helped shape who they are. And I just see that we're headed with the test and, the ESCA waiver and the evaluations tied. It's a short state because they can't really, they can't, like one of the teachers from it, she said, I don't know, second graders now, because she had my son. She says, I don't know if, little Johnny likes frogs or turtles, because I'm so busy, trying to hit all these and taking data, and I don't know if their little hearts and souls are. And that's like, in talking to people that are my friends, I just want to untie into our teachers, you guys, so you can touch our kids. And however we do that, but the test tied to those teachers.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
We just need to be able to get something that's uniquely
And
our own.
I wish we were on a test committee, because to me that's the bigger issue
Amen.
altogether.
Amen, Nick.
And I think everything, I think the
We have to beat Amendment 3 first.
Yeah, I think people are forgetting, they think that if we do defeat Amendment 3, it's all better, and it's not better.
I'm not bringing that into it.
But I'm just saying, I don't think people understand.
The ESCA waiver is still out there, and that is the mandate of the ESCA waiver.
The no child left behind act a decade ago changed everything.
Yes.
But to me, that's a different discussion than,
But it's where our teachers are headed this year.
Yep.
And that's what one important thing I need to do is spot teachers a year.
And also a lot of districts, they get a reprieve from them stuff for a year.
And that's what
They do, I mean, the bill does that for
Thank
districts.
you for saying that.
I want to start.
No, I really appreciate your feedback. Give me a.
In my hometown, there is a curriculum development specialist from the high school who's here. There is a classroom teacher who's here. And who do you think got front page write-up coming up here in the local newspaper? It wasn't me. I've not been mentioned. And I don't get asked ever my opinion about anything as a classroom teacher.
No.
In 32 years, I have never had anybody come to me and say, what works for you? What's good for you? They go to the curriculum specialist, they go to the admin, they go to everybody else, and that is the way the world works.
But you're in the
But not in my I would be asking.
Sorry, not to be too harsh.
Well, I mean, I'm speaking for a pretty big
I know.
district, actually. Not just my little, but West Plains is a big district.
It's not true.
You are a big teacher fan. Yeah, and that's just my opinion. I mean, that's what I've lived through. You know, if I want it in the paper, I'm gonna have to go down and say, hey, I'm buying that. I'm in there too. Write a letter. But, well, I'm just amazed I'm here, honestly. I really am. I didn't think anybody would ever.
They wanted an articulate person.
Just a classroom.
Let's go.
No, I've been kind of thinking, I mean, part of it me is almost the writing aspect. The things that
This is it, it's just trying.
The words are bigger in this one. I always have a bigger word.
But like to manage it and how you work it, how
That's why I want to do it.
I think even technical writing make you think about writing a process paper. I mean, that's one of the things that we do in my class, the process paper, which really helps kids organize.
I'm gonna go look at it first, and
That's information. Right.
I'm gonna look at these things. Since I feel like I've already documented my thinking here. I just need to go back through my thinking.
That is one of the.
Right. And then he says the 10th grade. I need to think about it in terms of.
You know, I think right. But I think the infographics piece and the visual aids and varied mediums is huge when you think about just.
I do too.
Yeah,
And that's the thing
multimedia
that scares me.
presentation is standard 5 or speaking listening.
The thing that scares me about going back to the older standards is they don't have that technology and multimedia in there. And it seems like to me it's easier to take away if you don't like something than it is to try to remember to add it.
And do we have much about, and I kind of inundated with all of
Technology.
but inferences?
Yeah, there's stuff in there about drawing inferences.
Okay.
Even in the core English.
I'm gonna put Gregor, I'm gonna put Gregor, I'm gonna put inference,
Carrie, do you think you're gonna need more chart paper? Do you want me to move some of that stuff?
analysis.
You might, but if we do, I'll.
Why? Okay.
I've got one here, I'll move it over.
An application of information.
Okay.
It is up here, it's gotten more and more.
Here, let me show you.
And
Carrie, the second college career readiness anchor standard for reading is determine central ideas and themes of attack and analyze their development, summarize the key supporting details and ideas. Well, you can't do that.
Right. And that's, you know, when Common Core came out, it was actually something, at least for us in Career Tech Ed, that made things more relevant.
Because it has a whole, and it does have the string of this information.
Correct. So it really helped kind of.
Didn't ignore you anymore.
And we talked about that last
When
time,
you
how
look
that
at
was
it,
one of the things we really
right.
liked about any of the sets, that if they
Yeah.
had a strand that separated that out, we really liked.
Well, if you look at the most complicated reading,
Oh, yeah.
it's all tech
complex.
levels.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but nobody thinks that. They
Right.
think, oh, well, college reading. You know, but most of our kids can't, you know, a lot of our kids can't even get to the ASVAB and do it well.
Well, and I really like what Mary Della said the last time we met, near the end of the day, that for the majority of our kids, they're not going to begin freshman English as a college student and take a literature course. They're going to have an English 101, and that course is going to be nonfiction. You know, their textbook is going to be a textbook of essays. It's not going to be a novel. Yeah.
Or
So I can
analyzing
appreciate that very much. And it probably it's interesting because the question on, you know, every year the EOCs, sophomore EOCs has some sort of graphic, whether it's a recipe or something, and that is the one that my kids struggle with most. There is
there was
no
that
bad
recipe for lentils.
The lentils. That's on the release note.
Oh, it's amazing.
But this last year, it was something like chocolate trees, or these cocoa trees, and developing chocolates and those cocoa beans.
What's the last release test that there was of the ELC? Because what I'm working on,
the same one with the diary at the beginning, the diary of
Well, but
Randy
she's
Silverling.
eighth grade.
yes, but I did the ninth grade test.
Oh, you did
Yeah.
that.
Okay, on the ninth grade one, the last one I know of was released was the one that had the history of oil in Tulsa.
Yes.
And the people that travel.
Right.
And that's-
Yeah.
They have a release warning.
That's another thing I don't really understand why I am a grade teacher and giving a freshman level test, but we get bonus points. That's what the state has it set up. We get bonus points to give an algebra or English test as a KA.
So you actually give that test?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. We don't do that. Yeah, we do it in algebra.
They, okay, all schools are required to give an EOC. There is no EOC for K through 8.
Right. Where are you going?
Give freshman English.
Because you said 10
And
minutes.
64%. Which, that's kind of strange.
Which says they should have been interviewing you.
Well, it's kind of a straight person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've given it 2 years in a row now, and I've had 65%.
I'm just sliding behind the door.
This is one of the locating.
Casey, thank you so much for doing that.
Sample questions that they do on.
There we go.
But it is
ACT
a
does
bonus
a workplace
kind of
readiness
test.
test.
On your APR
certificate. So this is the locating information at a level 6.
And I'm not sure what they do when they
So
do get to be freshmen.
you have
They have to
to
take
read.
Well,
yeah.
in
You can
or-
Pull this out.
Taking AOC?
It's
No,
not-
this is, these are just samples on the ACT
I think I
workplace.
can find out because I only did it once.
But there's, you know, there's also some reading information, there's business
We
writing.
had to use the text complexity chart.
And this is what a lot of that is going to be moving toward.
They were eliminated.
Right.
And now you actually have to read on the same test, but the more robust ones.
Which I think is incredibly important.
I do too. Information.
You know, instead, those people don't know how
I will
to
have fewer kids
do their
passing it.
VCRs.
That's fine. I mean,
That
it is
is
a freshman test. And I only give it because I have to. If they ask me, do you want to give it, I would say no, it's just on top of math, EOC, and then if the,
I agree. I think
what is it, the NAEP people come in, we're doing that this year.
Right.
Oh, right. Oh. It's just a
Earlier, I had
It's
one
just-
that's been shown Clearwater.
Is it really?
So I have one with Brady too.
And then there's business writing, where you have a prompt and then you have to
Respond.
That's called ACT work keys.
ACT work keys.
And they're always looking for things like that. You just go with it.
Some of the people who are in the sample is in Kansas City. District ones. Yeah. And then state ones. And state ones. Yeah, and then the same tutors that I've got to job is on it. Is she not on here?
Instructional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I called and left her a message.
Then I got it.
Right, yeah, she did, I knew. Right. Karen Wilson.
No. That's why I did car. No, I don't fly around. No, Indiana, I don't mean, no, Louisiana, I don't mean the state of Louisiana. The little city of Louisiana.
Yeah.
Louisiana, Missouri.
Okay.
Not
So Indiana.
She said
Missouri.
you're fairly
Over
near
the over Mississippi River.
Yeah, well, it's such a place.
Yeah, well, it's a
Well, I
little
live in California.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Louisiana.
Okay, I thought you meant Indiana as in the state.
No, Louisiana, Missouri.
Okay.
It's right on the Mississippi River.
Right.
And it's kind of scary.
And you know what? It might
Yeah,
be,
that's what I mean.
it might be flooded more when I get there.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to Google it. I packed my bags before I left home this morning because I didn't know if I'd be able to get home.
Well, I was even concerned that down here on the flats, I just think it might be flooded.
I know, that's right. We went on a cruise this summer of the Mississippi River.
Yes.
Oh, I loved it. Yes, American Queen. Oh, wonderful. Well, we started in St. Louis and we were supposed to go up to, up north. No, this was the 5-day. We just did the 5-day cruise because we were not sure that we really, would be a match with us. We're supposed to go to Hannibal and then come back. But the flooding was so bad that we started by bus and they dropped us off in Paducah and we started there. And so we went on the river, the Ohio, for a ways, and then we hit and came back up to St. Louis. But, it was fun. You talk about hamburger, oh my gosh, all you do is eat. Yes, it was expensive. But we're going, next time we're on a full dome, we decided it was definitely worth it. But, yes, we're going supposedly from St. Louis to St. Paul. And so,
And the river is still really wide at St. Paul, so you ever been to the
People need more time.
I do, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm the only one that actually needs the time, but I,
No,
well, she left because she needed quiet, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know Richards? Yes. Are you West Plains?
yes.
Actually, do you know who that is? West Richards?
No.
It's like she's still really big.
Is it an adult or?
No, she's a sophomore.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it depends on where, what rural school she came from.
Yeah.
She wasn't a Hal Valley or Glenwood, or I would definitely know her.
Yeah, I'm not sure. West Plains needs to be.
Yeah, I know of her.
Are they?
Karita. She's pretty rich.
Yeah.
The basic concept.
Oh, you spoke to that issue in the time to the document. I mean, when it says this, I want it in glossary.
Okay.
Yeah. You should be able to
So
do this.
understandable words, in glossary.
Like that stupid trace that I keep harping about.
Get rid of trace. We're doing it.
It's, it's not in the glossary. That's what bothers me. One
Uses
thing.
verbiage.
Trace, okay, well, don't explain what it is.
The only reason our district had a big thing as part of this big, we call powerful words, and so when I first, that was the only reason I knew it meant, for this purpose.
It just bugs me that they would use it and not put it in somewhere. Either a teacher glossary or a student glossary.
Or use words that everyone has to hear being added. You don't have to cover it.
Right. Well, for so long, that's what teachers say.
I was gonna say, what
I
word
think you
is
might
that?
be right. Well, that's what teachers have done, like we're shooting at a target that we can't see. That's how I felt many years.
Well, it's talking about shooting
Well,
the target
I
you can't see, it's when we just have those. The show me standards.
Yes.
Yeah.
We didn't have a clue what we were.
Oh, I remember.
That wasn't part of the good thing.
And you can't
Give the test ever, Don't ask me about a test. I haven't seen one in years.
Well, one thing I did like,
Unless it got released. They don't do that anymore.
The test, Missouri used to release. it.
Yeah, but in 2007 and 8.
Yeah, that was the last time.
Money. You give him money to rewrite them.
They put up with assessment.
Exactly, I know. The performance of that,
Yeah,
about
it has
it,
to be
95 was incredible.
Oh,
That was,
That's what I'm talking about.
How can we afford all this extra?
Yes, that was it now.
Where's this money?
It does cost.
It's shorter.
It costs more, but because, and again, I don't want to get into testing debate because that's not over here, but because so many states are part of the consortium, I mean, in the past, each state had to pay McGraw-Hill to write their own test, and that cost a lot of money. Now it's a smaller cost for like test development, and so where they're putting the money then is in like scoring writing, for example. So they will have writing on them, which is, to me, I think that part of it is a plus. Because we haven't touched it forever.
If you can use a test that's already prepared that matches standards, it's cheaper. But Missouri has always done a really good job of making sure that the test they use matches their standards.
Seventh grade had the writing test the past 2 years. They brought it back.
But then, this one has constructive response, I know because I work for the private, and for example, in the Google research part of the writing, they would, some of the items I wrote, we had to write, the introductory paragraph, and then we would provide a set of facts, and then we had to document on the topic, and then.
Yeah, I should have come get this. Anyone else need more time? I know I was the slow one, I'm sorry. Anyone need more time? Okay, let me go check on Jill after I pour my water into my cup.
Yes, 50 years ago. And, you know, I thought, if they do that, they'd be, you know, rich policy makers. And so that's what I don't like. Oh, I know. Oh, these are specific that eliminates that I mean, there's still some. Oh, I remember that one, and it was like a 7 year count. It was, and, but you know, they did surprisingly well. I thought they would sit there and absolutely not know.
I never even did that one.
But they actually,
So I wanted to make sure I covered that a little bit.
Yeah, the other one.
Right, which is, I mean, like, that was my thinking. Yeah, and that's not, you know, yeah, shame on those companies, that's the thing that makes me so mad. You know what I'm saying?
I was gonna say, man, I bet it took a long time.
And I did a moment from September
For which test?
for the 11th grade test, and all the items I was assigned were either research or writing. I didn't write any.
That's one of ours. Okay, I'm not taking this down because it's too important. I'm just gonna put it down below. Because I want to move this to the center, but I also, this is very stupid paper. I don't want to get rid of this. I should have done this before I had to come back in the room, sorry. Okay, so, I asked you if you want to do this. I know, she's thinking of it. I asked you if you want to do things, and you said no. Okay, so, I feel like there were some things that I was thinking that I was like, I think I went there, but I'm not really sure. So, well, I'm gonna listen to a little bit of what you say, and then if some of what you say sounds like the thing I was thinking maybe I want that literature, then that'll be good for me, and if not, then I might engage in conversation about the things I was like, because I would think, oh, I want this, and then I thought, oh, I don't know if I actually do. So that was not good. But anyway, that might have just been me. Clearly I was a special one and needed a lot of extra time. So, in our new and improved Missouri learning standards, what we want, what we don't want. Yeah? Does that work? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't care where we start. You just tell me things and I'll write them down. I'm pretty good at that.
Vertical progression. We want to see specifically what a skill looks like from kindergarten through 12th grade, differentiated by grade level.
Okay. So vertical progression.
I did, I'm sorry. But just you can say by grade
K
level.
through 12.
Yeah. But, I mean, whatever.
That's
however you want to do it.
vision.
Yep.
We'll be 6 through 12, right? But
Right.
Vertical progression, K through 12.
Specific to each grade, if you want to put that. I mean,
Not combining.
right. So
No,
what
not
I
a
don't
band.
want to see is the same standard 6th grade through 12th grade, because then everybody owns it and nobody owns it.
Well,
Nine,
we're just-
10, 11,
So, can I say then, what I found my I don't want is I don't want the grade bands. The 9,
Right.
10, 11,
That's what
12.
I agree.
That has driven me
I agree.
crazy, and our teachers don't
I
know
agree.
what they own.
Yep.
And that has been
Yep.
really difficult for us.
What is it, the 9th grade?
And we went through and arbitrarily made that decision. Like, we're like, whoa, this feels like 9th grade. Well, we teach American literature in 11th grade, so all that stuff goes there. So, okay, so we don't want standards by bands, right?
Yes.
And I think going back to what Nick said, I like vertical, we have to have that, that's essential, but I don't want it to be just one verb change. I think
Right.
that has
Meaningful.
been, I want it to be meaningful, don't just
Yes.
go from
Yes.
I'm with you.
determine, evaluate, and analyze.
delineate.
Okay,
I
so
want
let me
it to be
figure out how to
meaningful.
say that. So
Not
vertical
just
progression,
the verb.
specific to each grade,
That's
but the
meaningful.
clear, meaningful.
Because then what does it look like for a 4th grader or a 5th grader?
There's a 2-word change
Right.
or 1-word change, and it looks the same.
And you know, I feel like when they don't change, because sometimes they don't. I feel like, okay, I know what that means. That means that in 7th grade they were responsible for teaching it, and in 8th grade we're responsible for continuing to apply it. Like I can do that, that's okay. But when we don't, like what you said, when just a verb changes, like, well, what does that
Well,
really
what does that
mean?
verb mean and what does it look like?
Yeah.
And how's it gonna look like in your room?
So then, to
versus
your
room
point,
over
you
there?
want I know you do.
A glossary.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wouldn't mind having a teacher glossary, teacher parent, or and a student.
Worksheet.
And I want every verb identified. I do.
Okay.
I want it.
And
I don't want to see
teacher-
a verb hanging on that thing that I'm like,
What
what?
does this mean?
Where's this? And it's nowhere.
Do you want the word trace in
I
there?
want trace. No, I really want trace. That goes on the delta. Trace can
I had
be
that on my
there.
list too. That sure does help.
Yep.
I think I like having that, what we discussed earlier, for me is very important to have that explanation page like South Carolina did for grade level in the beginning. More of a, something we could,
Summary.
yeah, and it would be so easy for schools to pull it out and say to their 5th grade or 8th grade, send this home to your teachers. Here's the
Narrative
discussion.
intro to each grade level. That's
Yeah.
what I- okay. So that's what we're.
Yep.
I like that too, and you know what I would really like, and this is not for this group, I would really like that to replace the rationale that we have to write for part of, that's a
Yeah.
instant thing, like
When-
curriculum coordinator
I know,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, we have a rationale, I'm
But that
providing a
would help.
rationale for a required course.
Yep.
All right, so narrative, intro. Okay, what I'm gonna say though, as a kind of a caveat to that, hold on, I can't write and talk at the same time, is what I don't wanna see is like, was that also in, yes, which they also had in their standards was, level, or English 3 is American literature, English 4 is French literature, I don't like that at all.
I agree.
So, do I need to put that up there, or do we all pretty much agree we don't wanna
I still think it needs to be
Put it up
there.
there.
On there.
put it out there?
Just to-
That was in South Carolina? Yeah, they have like, they have that nice intro, but in their intro was like, clearly English 3 is, it says it's American lit,
Right.
and it says the English 4 is Brit lit.
So you want genres integrated
Intros are
across?
mainly for the curriculum frameworks, and that's why they have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, but we, yeah, I would like to make sure that we don't include that in there, so how do,
Well,
what
so
should I
you want
say?
genres integrated across, like American literature,
Well, I just don't want to see that English reading has to be all American
Okay.
lit. You know, that if a school district decides that they want that to be Brit lit, they can, or if they want it to be a historical survey of some sort,
So
they can,
different
you know.
types of
So,
literature
you know, I want to
integrated
see us
across-
not,
limit teachers.
That's a curriculum issue, not
It-
a.
it
that's
is,
why I
but
said
it's-
I think
Don't
that's
limit
not
text
a
selection.
curriculum. That's why
Don't
it's put
limit
that
text
way forward.
selection.
It wasn't intended as a standard.
I see what you're saying, but it feels like, I mean, like, I just don't want us to go there.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the issues that we've had with some of those upper level standards, is that they write in historical texts such as, and then we're like, oh, okay, now we're
Yep.
limited. So, okay, no limit to or on text selections. Period.
This is Elizabeth.
I want standards that focus on the plus
I'm
side.
really tired. Thanks for
That focus
making time
on
today.
analysis, synthesis, assessment, evaluation. In other words, higher level
No, I'm
not.
cognitive skills.
Right.
Standards that focus on higher level skills, thinking skills, rather than staying at the level of comprehension.
Right.
Not that those aren't hard to do.
Yes, the high level thinking skills.
Well, I'd like to ask what everybody thinks of, I don't like this, with some guidance and support from peers and adults. That's mentioned here and there. Well, it's not scaffolding, because when it's scaffolding, it says, I mean,
Scaffolding, yeah.
it specifically says scaffolding.
Okay.
Develop and strengthen writing. I don't know, isn't that implied?
I will tell you what I like about it was for, when we developed curriculum and that was in the standards, it helped us to know when it's really appropriate for the teacher to be stepping in a lot versus I should be moving them toward independence. And so clearly for those, for us, the expectation is there's not independence at that grade level.
Maybe
with
that should be said.
That was what, I mean, that's how we interpreted it. That was how and we liked that there was the expectation that there was going to be help from the teacher or in peers. We have our kiddos, you know, like sometimes write together or whatever. Get
Well, this just says peers and adults, it doesn't say teachers.
Well, that's just
So that infer, that
So-
means,
But I think that.
Well, I know, but, you know.
Well, I like my point was as a coordinator. So I don't know about a teacher, okay, but speaking from my coordinator perspective, when we write curriculum and when we put into our curriculum what we want students to be able to do, we want them to be able to do whatever that is in writing, but we don't necessarily want them to do it with independence. And so that helps us when we think about what are we going to hold students accountable for. And then if we write that into our curriculum, then every teacher knows that that's what they're supposed to do. Otherwise, what ends up happening is, well, this teacher provides more support, and this teacher provides none, because it clearly states in there that they're supposed to be doing it independently. Does that make sense? We liked it for that reason, because it helped us, especially with like I don't know what level you're looking at. I'm thinking of like our little guys.
6, 7, and 8.
Okay, what is that one?
It's production and distribution of writing. CCR Standard 5, develop and strengthen writing as needed by planning, revising, editing, rewriting, or trying the approach. And that's what it says. With some guidance and support from peers and adults, develop
Okay,
and
that's
strengthen
different.
writing.
that
Well,
allows for
but-
some group writing.
And
some
collaborative
collaborative
writing.
To your point,
But
it
collaborative.
impacts assessment design, right? If-
Well, I'm thinking of assessment.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like that
Yes.
standard, you would
Yeah.
not then ask them to do that independently on an assessment because
Right.
that standard
Right.
doesn't support that.
Right.
However, I think, and I know you don't want to hear this, but all week long, my kids have come home and they've been having issues and what's going on, and there's a common theme that, well, we're in these groups and we're just doing it on our own, and so I'm hoping that's not how it's being interpreted, that they're in this group, and my son was so confused about something, and my daughter, same thing, and I said, well, what was the purpose of the group? What we were teaching each other this, and I'm like, oh, how are your notes accurate? And so for me, that opens itself up to teacher going, okay, getting in a group, you guys here work on this, and I understand, we are full cooperative learning, but a lot of people haven't had all that training to know how you do it effectively,
Well, I
and
think
they
that's
just
a peer
throw them
thing.
into a group.
The peer thing muddies the water. The piece I was
peer
thinking
piece
of
is what-
was actually lower level, which is like with assistance from the teacher or whatever.
Well, from a teacher's perspective though, what I like about that standard is that it tells me that I need to teach writing as a process and not just as an end result. Like that's really what that standard tells me,
Well,
that I'm
that there's
responsible
steps.
for teaching
Right.
it as a process, not just
Well,
Right.
and one of the things we've been thinking about writing a lot. One of to your point is that it's not it's not just me. It's not an independent process.
Yeah.
Others get involved.
Right, yeah.
You know, like I give it to a friend of mine to read, or I ask for, here's what I'm trying to say here. How would you do it? Kind of there is that community aspect to writing that maybe that's what's implied there. But anyway,
And then
so I think what we need to decide is, do we like that or not? So like, do we want to see none of that? Do we want to see some of it where it's appropriate? Does that
Maybe
make
state it differently, or maybe reword it so it's,
So when scaffolding is required, clearly
Yes.
state that.
yes.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Because I think that's what
Our
confusion is
special
right now.
ed right now is really having a hard time with figuring out how we're doing all the scaffolding and how it looks and. Right.
I do think that with guidance and support from peers and adults allows for peer editing, you know, in the writing process here on this particular standard.
Well, I stuck after years of
And that's what
we do.
that is what you
That's
do.
part of the process, you know, but I get it.
One thing we've been saying all morning, we want a limited number of standards. Now, again, that's a balancing act because we also have a pretty healthy laundry list of things we want graduates to be able to do, but we want a limited number of standards.
So I wrote down somehow balance fewer strands, or you know, like fewer strands in some of them, because
What?
some of them had too many. Somehow balance fewer strands with fewer overall indicators. That, which is kind of like you're saying, like where we can.
I guess I've got two things to say. I think I like fewer strands because I think that integrates better.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
important to me, but I also think we should have a manageable number of actual standards to teach. Personally speaking, that means less than 50, and 50 is on the high side.
So should I say fewer strands?
I'd
We
say
said
I'd say
that at the
both.
last meeting, and we looked at the ones in, what was it, South Carolina and Massachusetts. And actually, both of those had more strands than the current Missouri University.
Right. So we want
So,
a limited number of
right.
strands, right? Okay. So limited number of strands, and
That
then
promote integration.
And integrated standards. Limited strands with integrated standards.
Right.
Yeah.
They really need to.
Well, what I wrote down, which probably falls in under here, is that I really like the relationship between literary text and informational text. And the reason I like that is because I feel like sometimes we stopped using the textbook and went to classroom libraries for the most part, but when we were using our textbook, I felt like what we were doing was so much siloed, short story,
Yes.
short story, and then it was like, oh, I know
Yes.
that I'm supposed to be doing some nonfiction with you, so here's a piece of nonfiction, and it didn't always like feel like it was promoting anything. That, you know, like it didn't. And the kids, it was like, well, that's my poem or that's my nonfiction piece, and I think even the teachers it felt like that. So I like that we think intentionally about pairing those so that I can see that, you know, there's a topic that we're exploring and there's literary text on it and there's informational text on it, and I have to figure out how to read both of them. And so I don't. Does that go? What's that? Then you think
integrated
You think the
standards.
okay.
Yes.
So
Integration.
limited standards.
I would make 2 bullet points.
Yes,
I think
I
they're
would
2
too.
different statements.
Because that's
You want a
important.
limited number of standards, but you also want
Looking for the
integrated
integration.
standards.
You're looking at integration in and across, within and across strands. Integration within and across strands.
Strands.
Because that promotes that teaching topically rather than I'm going to do my unit on poetry, or I'm going to do my unit on nonfiction.
It's the most revolutionary thing about the standards, isn't it?
Yes.
All
That we're
right,
actually
so
moving on.
we said integrated.
Looking at our
Integration within
And across strands. Strands.
Thank you.
Jenna, just for clarification for the notes, you said that limits teaching topically, but the example you gave is a genre.
No.
Will you clarify for me?
What it means is it allows teachers to teach topically as opposed to isolating it
Okay,
to a genre.
that's what I wanted to make sure.
I will wait. Yes.
When they have examples, I find they're either ridiculously pinpointed or very skimpy, like the EG, for example.
Okay.
Like, analyze in detail, EG, through examples or anecdotes. And they'll have one or two little examples there.
So what I would like is, if that's what we intend to use, then let's say it.
Yeah, either
Like not,
nothing.
because otherwise that leads us up going, are we
Nothing
assi-
or
is that what
let's
you're
say.
assessing us on, or is it not what you're assessing us on?
That's what I
Okay,
was thinking.
okay, but here's my comment on, I have a different take on that, maybe, I don't know, or maybe not, but I'm looking at something, especially like the language standards, for 11 and 12, let's looking at conventions, when it kind of goes crazy. You, on the one hand, if you don't provide an EG, some people want to know, well, what do you mean? But on the other hand, once you provide the EG, that becomes what they think they have to teach.
Could that be a separate document?
So it's, that, it could be.
An EG, here are some EGs for this.
So then you get into having an appendix.
Yeah.
radio, but
Well, or maybe it's a glossary, because can you go back and say,
It could be
maybe
a
what you were just
glossary,
reading?
yeah, because you
Yeah.
use the word, the
Oh, there you
phrase,
go.
and then.
What was the,
automatically
oh, I'm sorry, I was just thinking, what were those examples of again, so that maybe we could think, would that be a word that could go in a glossary that could be defined by, here are examples of what this
I
thing
think it
is?
could be better defined like that
Okay.
than it is in this document.
So, let's think, what we don't want are,
Skimpy EGs.
Give me examples.
Well,
Well,
here's the one I was looking at, for grade 11 and 12, on demonstrate command of the conventions of English. Their point A under that is hyphenation conventions. Now, I correct errors in hyphenation, but you know, like, really? Why that particular?
okay, so, hold that back, 'cause I had something to say about that, I was holding back on that. Let me go back to this one. What we don't want are ambiguous examples.
Well,
right?
examples that clarify but don't limit. Is that what we want?
That's what we want.
We want examples that clarify
Specific
but
but
do
not
not
limiting.
limit.
Well, and I think it might,
It's a glossary item.
I kind of feel like it's a glossary item, because then it doesn't limit you, because then you can, because I think one of the reasons why it turns into an EG is it's like, well, I don't want to list all of them.
Right.
Because when you list all of them, it's not for example anymore.
Right.
And it also makes you
It's a
think you have to
list.
do all of it.
It's a list.
So, let's see, we want, examples.
That clarify. But we don't want them to limit.
This one was analyze in detail how a key individual, event, or idea is introduced, illustrated, and elaborated, e.g., through examples or anecdotes.
Yeah, that's right. Examples included in the glossary, not tied to the standards. I think you hit it on the head right there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's so important, because I think that sometimes, I think there's one time somewhere in there where mythology is an example, and then we ended up with a teacher who was like, I'm teaching a whole mythology unit because it's in the standards, and I was like, nothing on
Yep.
curriculum says mythology, what are you doing?
Oh, and on that same topic, there also is a Bible
Right.
reference twice in
Right.
here.
As
And are we
source text.
teaching Bible classes?
Right.
Bible
No.
allusions?
I teach it.
Well, but do you also teach Quran, and do you teach Book of Mormon? And why is the Bible singled out?
But
Right,
that goes-
but that's an example, right?
Well, it goes back to what you were saying about we don't want to limit text selection. period.
Right,
Right?
right, because I think that's defining what an illusion is,
Teaching
right?
American and British literature, most of the
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
that's
Okay.
rather than that.
Right,
Yeah.
so, and that's like a definition of what an illusion is, right? So we would make sure that we would clarify, and I think that makes it I think we pull it out of the standard.
Right.
That's better, because then it doesn't feel like I have to teach those things, because it is,
This one says, analyze how modern work of fiction draws on themes, patterns,
Right.
events, characters, types from myths. Here's the example. Myths, traditional stories, or religious works such as the Bible.
right.
And
Because-
that is gonna, that myths, traditional legends, and the Bible.
Right, but that's just how,
Fiction,
yeah,
fiction,
right.
fiction.
So what we need to do is, in our,
Which goes back to what we don't want, right?
Right.
We don't want standards that specifically say you have to do this text or you can't do this, right?
so what I
I just don't like it in
What
there.
I
No, I
indicated
agree.
was that I really do not like, I don't know how to fix it, to be honest with you. So this is one of those I was like, I'm not sure. I really don't like language as standalone. Because, and here's why I don't like it, and then you guys can talk me down, okay, off of my crazy whatever. I am working really hard to try to help move this is me personally, so again, my teachers from looking at grammar as this thing that I teach, and then writing as this thing that I teach, and then getting frustrated when what I teach over here in grammar doesn't show up over here in my writing. And I feel like when I take those language standards and I call them out, and then I have this list, it just lends itself to them doing that. And then it also lends we tried to integrate it in our curriculum, but it still made it a little difficult for us to do that. Now, I don't know what the answer to that is. I also don't like that vocabulary piece being its own thing either, because I feel like when it's its own thing, it goes back to that, we teach words and we have a test and that's what we do. And that's not what I want. I want my students to be able to understand what they're reading. I want them to use really good vocabulary in their writing. So that, just having it, I don't know. That's just me. That's my don't want, but I don't know that, I don't want to write up there if everyone's like, yeah, I kind of like it that way.
Well, say it again. What would you write if you had to write one down?
Language.
I would write, I don't want the separation of language and vocabulary standalone standards.
Grammar and vocabulary instruction in service to writing.
Vocabulary.
Yeah, I want to see them tied to writing.
Right.
So I guess it's not what I don't want, but it is what I really don't want it.
So you're teaching subject and verbs in order to write subject-verb agreement.
No, if you're teaching writing, and if there's a problem with subject-verb agreement in a student's paper, then you choose that moment to do subject-verb agreement. Because that's what they're working on.
Or I
teach a subject-verb. I mean, it's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm going to just raise a question about this, just a way to think about it. I'm just going to guess, well, at least I always assume, that the reason for that strand is that language is made up of two things, words and the way they're organized to have meaning. And they're saying you've got to have some competency with those two, and that works in writing, and that works in reading, it works in speaking and listening.
Yeah, I will say I agree with you, because we struggle with our elementary report card where to put word study, because it's in the service of writing and in the service of reading, so.
But I think it also, that discussion, which to me is more of the micro level where we need to go next, but that discussion I think also fits under the limited number of strands. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Well,
for
maybe it
example,
also fits under the integration.
Right.
Because I don't feel like they're well integrated,
Right.
the writing and the language currently. I would like to see a better integration. So maybe that's where that goes. So I feel better. See, I told you I really wasn't even going to say some of these things out loud, but I did.
I just think a lot of people want to have language specifically identified because, it is about English. Every language has those two parts, but.
Yeah. I feel better. Okay.
Yeah, and this probably goes without saying, but I think the standards we come up with should tightly align to the graduate outcomes we came up with. Again, that probably is a duh comment, but if we're looking at evaluating standards frameworks, to me, that needs to go together.
And also, we need to get the technology. It has to be the use of varied technology, mediums.
But to me, Jada, that's exactly where, if...
Okay.
I'm not going to sit by you tomorrow.
One time. So we have to...
If we're tightly aligning our standards to these graduate outcomes that we've already come with, then that all...
But what I will say is I put on what I don't want is I don't want keyboarding and how many pages they have to type in my standards. Can I put that on there? Does anyone disagree with that? I don't want keyboarding and how many pages they have to type.
In one sitting.
At all. I don't even want it at all. I don't want that they have to type. I don't care what. I just don't want that in my standards.
But I think that's also reflected in our graduate outcomes, right?
They have to.
We never said in our graduate outcomes that we care that you can type X number of pages.
Right.
So
I don't like that.
We don't care what anybody else says.
It's any of it. I don't want any of that in there. I don't want any.
So we don't want no keyboarding.
No. I do want keyboarding, but I don't want it to be my responsibility. You're sassy today. I'm like, we don't want no keyboarding.
We don't want no.
You said that real good. You said that real good.
We don't want grammar either.
Examples of sarcasm. And they have to know where the subject and verb are. You
can't say, so
Does
if
your
you don't
subject
have
degree
keyboarding
department, they
degree,
don't
then
know.
what are they gonna just quit
And
getting keyboarding, you guys extract?
Phrases.
Oh, specific number of pages.
Like, I don't, it says that they have to be able to type, I don't want that in my.
I think it's kind of like a point you should.
Someone else owns that.
She was
Someone else should own that. And
we're breaking that in.
as a teacher, my kids type, but I didn't teach them how to type, so that they could type.
Right, that is.
Okay,
All
all
right,
right,
Sherry,
yeah.
you know I'm gonna say it. I want in our new improved standards, something that we own, if it can be done, that needs to be on my warrant.
That we own it?
That we own, that it's ours.
Okay, I felt like that was implied.
Yeah.
By the new and improved.
Well,
Okay.
they probably wouldn't have to put it on there though.
Okay. Thank you.
I really like the speaking and listening standards. I don't know that they need to be a separate strand. I go back and forth, but I don't know. It gets touchy with me because I don't think that a strong set of standards necessarily creates an excellent teacher. We know that that's not the case. However, a strong set of standards does influence what a teacher does, and I can appreciate the fact that I have to consciously teach students how to communicate in more ways than just filling out a worksheet. You know, and I think that helps move our students from past teaching to being a 21st century learner.
They also have some of the things Carrie was talking about, those standards about interpreting media text, which is so critically important in the workplace, but also citizenship.
When I talked about listening to my sports radio.
Yeah.
Okay. I had that down as something I really want to see. Because I like the collaborative discussion emphasis, because it's not just emphasis on a speech or a presentation, it's on how to talk to each other about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So how do we feel about including speaking and listening or something along those lines?
Yes.
Anyone? No?
What did you say? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I think so. We have that in our first little paper.
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah. So we probably, that's my, I don't know, I feel like I'm getting redundant now.
Well,
The paper.
or if these are two different pieces of work, I can see why you want to write it again.
Okay.
Are we gonna, just to say, say 21st century skills that we need to take the strands?
There's in here.
I've thought about this a lot. As a parent, do you want, how important is it to you that you are able to take a set of standards and read it and have it in non-educational jargon? Or should that be the responsibility of a teacher or for example, I would not take the Missouri Learning Standards right now and write them as they are written as an objective on the board. Right? Like, that's my job to take that standard, put it into an I can statement, put it on the board so that it's something that the kids can manage. So what do you feel?
I mean, as far as a parent and just like me walking in with my set of standards to a teacher eval and saying, okay, we got this one, this one, this one, that's not going to happen. But what does happen is that when my daughter comes home, just like Casey said, and said, Mom, it's ridiculous, I could teach my teacher. I'm sitting there, they give us this material and said, I mean, those are the things that bother me, is because, I think she needs to be challenged. So when I go back and look, okay, what is it? What are we trying to accomplish with my highly gifted daughter who's sitting, in a room bored out of her mind getting straight A's? I want her to be challenged. So for me, the translation is, is it the teacher? Is it the standards? I don't know. Because that's where I'm lost to some degree. But is it that, just like you guys are talking about, is it that it's translated by a teacher who maybe doesn't understand it, that they're not you,
Yes.
Because there are teachers, like, if she likes the bar to be raised, to stay engaged, and she loves to learn, but when she sits in a class and is bored to death, that's where I get engaged and get involved at a different level. Other than that, I'm not gonna pull it out, like I said, and make sure it's translatable for me, but I have to think that if I can't read the standards and understand them, you have teachers that can't either. So, I mean, because, again, not as smart as some, but I'm not
It may be choices on the teacher's parts too. I hate to say this, but there are teachers who use as an excuse because they'll say, I don't do much direct instruction, or modeling, and because I know that we want the students to be more engaged. But what they really mean is, I'm gonna turn it all over to them, so that, okay, but that's an instructional issue,
Right.
it's not a standard issue.
But I think the standards can be used as a scapegoat.
Oh, they can, and I don't think I can do anything. Don
Yeah,
could
but
get
yeah,
a
what they say.
standard.
So Lindsay, can I ask you what you were thinking there? Because I think you were thinking about language or how they're written or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, how parent friendly is it, how necessary is it that they are super parent friendly? You know, it's always been,
I think though that sometimes,
is that a negative, Jill?
Well, yeah, I made a little list out in the hall, because I needed to think quietly, and I wrote down not parent friendly.
The current standards?
So
I would agree.
what would make it more parent friendly? I think.
Less
from
jargon.
My
Okay.
Way less jargon.
Yes.
is to put everything for one grade level together.
Yes.
Yes.
At some place on the decimal.
Okay.
Right.
So I
Well,
guess what
and
I'm,
then-
Then I would go back, because I also wrote down, that I really like the narratives. And I think if the
might be
narratives,
helpful.
if the narratives are in plain English, which in the South Carolina
Right,
standards.
yes, they were.
I mean,
You're right.
they're kind of interesting, actually, to read, just, oh, this is what you guys are gonna do and get accomplished in a year, wow. I mean,
So
I think
what
a
you'd
parent
really
would
like
be
to
interested.
know is if you go into your child's ninth grade English class for back to school night, you'd like for the ninth grade teacher to have something that says, here's what we're gonna do.
Yes.
Yes.
And that, I mean, like, that's what our district has done
Sure.
at the district level, but what we're saying is we could easily do that at the state level so that.
wouldn't that be nice that everyone knows this is about what's going? So would it make sense then that that would be the component that would be the most parent friendly? And then the standards
Yes.
would include
Yes.
more of the,
Jargon.
and like when I think about jargon, I don't think about jargon that's beyond,
Right.
you know, like I'm thinking about it's the language of English.
Professional language.
Yeah, the language of English.
Formal.
Right, because it's what we're teaching, right? So it includes the actual, which is why we then will have a history to explain some of that language, which is fair. Okay, so I wrote parent friendly with the narratives so that we're clear on that. I really like the guiding principles, and I know that I like that part. We don't have it on here, right?
No.
So I like that. Is there anyone who wants me not to write that up there? I like.
Did I
Love
say
it.
that? No, I thought I did.
You said narratives.
I meant guiding.
Well, you said narratives, which helped us
Sorry.
because
Yeah,
no.
I meant guiding principles.
Okay, so and should those be parent friendly also?
Yeah.
I'm thinking yes, because it's like here's why we're doing what we're doing, right? Okay. So guiding principles that are parent friendly.
And I think those are super teacher friendly too.
Yes. Well, and I think that it really helps when, even when like someone moves into the state and it would, you know, look at it and would say, oh, here's why you're doing what you're doing. I get it.
Got it.
Right?
I just try to think about myself as a first year teacher. And if I was a first year teacher in a district that simply placed Missouri Learning Standards on my lap and said, go get them, I would be overwhelmed and what the heck do I do? I have no idea. So I can.
So that, okay, so then I have a question. I'm kind of not sure if I want to ask this question or not, but I want to. A couple days ago when we were here, I said that I felt like we have to think about the districts who have people in place like me, and let me tell you, I do several subject areas, so I'm not so great at it, but at least there is me and there's another me. But then there are districts who don't have a curriculum person, and it's the principal working with the teacher trying to write their curriculum, or it's the principal who says to the teacher, go write your curriculum. So what I'm thinking is that the standards need to be written in a way that they can be used as the curriculum.
I am from a district without a
Okay, but follow me here.
I'm with you
Follow me,
100%.
because it's going to happen.
Here's what.
Because there are districts who are just going to say, we don't write curriculum here,
Right.
we take the standards and we teach the standards.
But that's where I think Desi needs to come, as they've done already, right? They need to come in and, as a supplement, create a model curriculum that you can
Yes.
choose to
Okay,
use
that's
or you can choose not to use.
Okay.
But I don't think that belongs in the standards document.
Yeah, it doesn't bill.
You're right, I'll take that. Okay, thank you. So that's why I didn't want to say it out loud, because I knew that I would get like.
Carrie, you're doing a good job on that narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Oh,
If you do a good
that's a
job
good
on the
idea.
narrative,
the way we write the
We do a good job with the
narrative,
narrative.
Right.
any new teacher could look at it
Right.
and go,
Okay,
oh,
I
and
get
get a
it.
view of, a
Yep.
full picture view of where I'm going, where I'm starting, where
Okay.
I'm, middle.
I feel
end.
better.
Plus, there's not gonna be a teacher-proof set of standards, a teacher-proof curriculum framework. I mean, here's the old woman telling you not gonna.
Oh, no, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I try to consider that there are other districts that aren't like mine, and I have to think about that, and that's hard for me to do, but I try.
I have a couple of thoughts for the group's consideration. One is what I do want is to empower teachers, creativity, their ownership of the material, and their focus on the students. I want to empower them for those things, and maybe there's other words we can use. Those are some of my thoughts as far as what I do want.
Okay.
And what I don't want is for standards to be overly prescriptive.
I can write that easily. The other one I can't write as easily, so I have to help me with that one.
Okay.
I can write that one. Okay.
So I mean, if there's any thoughts on that.
When you say overly prescriptive, you mean simply dictating you must do.
Yeah.
So which is,
I
you
agree.
get into the weeds
Yeah.
of, you don't want it.
Teach it with this.
Teach
Right.
Right.
That's why some of us
these
were talking
terms
about
with
the
these
EGs,
books and
because
these.
If you
The EGs will be grasped by certain teachers as the curriculum.
And it doesn't,
Teach autonomy.
right,
Yes.
Teacher
Yes.
autonomy,
Yes.
that's a word. Good word.
100%.
yeah.
I don't want to do it.
I agree with that comment.
My thought is that, I don't want the teachers so focused on
How you get
what
there.
they have to do, that they're not focusing on the students and what they're trying to get them to learn. So if it's, oh gosh, I have to do this, or I'm not gonna meet that, then you lose some of that individuality that y'all bring into the classroom. That's my thought.
Stated another way, I mean, what should be tight, right, is this is where we want kids to be.
Right.
What should be loose is how do you get them there?
Well, and I would say the one thing that we can't control about that is how the districts go
Individual
about it.
districts.
Because, I mean,
Some
one of the things that we are trying really hard in our district not to do ever is to say, on this day, at this time, you're teaching this.
Right.
But there are other districts that say, on this day, at this time, you teach this. So that's a whole different discussion that we have no control over, because once we unveil those, a district can say, okay, we're sitting down and we're gonna plot it out day by day, and that's what you're gonna do. And if I walk into your room on this day at this time, and you're not doing it, there better be a pretty good explanation why.
Well, let's be
So-
honest, the second that these things are published and the board says, yep, let's do it, there are a bazillion companies that are going to be vying to make money off of
Yeah.
packaged
sure.
set,
Yeah.
which is
Yep.
one of the biggest issues that I have with the current Missouri State Learning Standards is that the packages that people have sold, many of them are not talking about.
Right.
Yes, and that's why.
We're just talking about
that's
everything.
Yep.
Well,
I
I
work
work
with
with teachers in the warehouse.
Well, I said provides for district teacher.
Oh, you got
Okay.
$100 worth
Okay.
of all that. So I think that like at least say that it's not gonna solve
So
for
I
you.
buy my
Right.
this every year.
It's not
Well,
gonna be-
right, at least not so
Well, one of
restrictive
the
that you don't
gals
have a
that works
choice.
in her husband's
But
high up in corporate, and she said, oh, we just, when this Common Core thing hit, we just went in, and her husband's people went in, pulled all these books, $30 million worth of books, ripped the covers off of them, recovered them.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And just
Oh, right.
Common Core
It's
launched,
ridiculous.
and that's it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
unfortunately, the districts that have been doing that are the same districts that bought from Pearson before with the last set of standards, and will buy whatever standards we come up
Yeah.
with.
We're
It's
talking
a
about
district
local
issue, not a
control.
standards
Right.
issue.
And we're talking about local control, and no matter what we write or
Right.
what the state board approves, the local people will make that choice. So I guess I'm just saying to everybody, being on the board, you get to your board. That's where the rubber hits the road. And if things aren't being done in your district properly, by your opinion or by your view, then you have control of that. You as voters have that control. And that's what we all say we want. We want local control. But you have to take control. State can't write tough enough and strict enough stuff to make sure that every district does it in a way that pleases everybody. And of course, we know that not everybody's going to be pleased no matter how they do it.
Right.
But the local population can make that choice.
But I think what Elizabeth was saying, and I love what she said, because I think when you are bogged down, like we said earlier, we want to keep it maybe less. When you're bogged down with so much, there's not enough time to be autonomous. There's not enough time to have that creativity in enough things to where you can truly have that. You're just going, I'm checking off because April's rolling around and how much can I get in before my window hits? Because if I don't, then I haven't done my job, and then it becomes this pressure to get it all in before testing because that is the end game. And I feel like, yeah, if we had less stuff to get in, I could do such a better job at it. You know, I could really, you know, do a better job.
So is there anything else you want to add? I started differentiate between, and that's it. That's all I got. I think that was my thought. Kind of disappointed in myself for someone else, but I don't know.
One other thing, and I don't even know how we word this, but I liked that they did it in the Massachusetts standards. They did point of view in the 9th grade and the 11th grade, and I noticed that in several places in the Massachusetts standards they did that. They did alternating years where they brought up the same thing, and I thought, well, that's good, you know, because then by the time they're seniors, they will have had it twice.
So I'm going to ask you a question about that, because one of the things we talked about was that vertical progression. So when I thought that, okay, so my question is, if that, like, for that, then I would want to see that, like, within the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Does that kind of get to that then?
Yep.
Because I would want to see, because I would hate for them to drop it out.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You know,
But you do want to see a different use of it, right, as they get older.
well, I would like,
One
yeah, I
thing
want
with
to see
one
how
thing
that
with
changes
ninth
as you
grade.
get older, because it sure should.
Yeah.
Especially
With 6th grade.
Right.
with point of view, it sure should change, right? It's not just first person, second person, third person anymore. It changes into something so well, fine. Okay, now I'm getting nerdy. Okay. So, is there anything else? Does that work for you? Okay. Anything else?
Right.
So, I'm gonna ask, like, we have a little bit on what we don't want. Yeah, hold on on what we do want, which is great. But is there anything like that you're just like, if this is in there, I will try to pull my hair out. I can't possibly teach it, or I can't possibly use it, or my teachers back at home will lynch me if I've been there or something. No?
Did we cover grammar? Where's grammar?
But it's in our graduate outcomes, right?
It's in the language.
So we
Yeah.
said a
That's
good
why
line
someone
there.
spoke for the language, to leave the language standards as a separate.
Yeah, when I said I wanted them.
But to me, that's more of a devil in the detail. Like again, once
Yeah,
you-
you're right.
once you
I
get
went
going,
there,
that's
but-
a conversation to have at the micro level.
And
At the
not
macro
relate
level,
anything
it's
else.
in our graduate outcomes.
Ideas to the group.
No, I'm saying,
So you might be able to help me with this
Purposes of
one. I
placing
remember
it.
when I was at,
no, I
meeting
was
a long time ago.
clarifying.
Sandra Stasky was talking about like critical thinking versus, and the, versus how much critical thinking you had to learn versus how much non-critical thinking literature you were reading. So the standards were kind of taking us more toward reading nonfiction. Does anyone know what I'm talking about here?
More apparent reading.
And that was kind of critical. So I'm an English major, so full disclosure. So I always like to read fiction because it helps you with critical thinking. So I was just wondering if do we need to get more in the weeds of not limiting any type of literature or anything like that, or is that being too in the weeds on this?
Right. I think in our
Well,
graduate
that
outcomes,
we
we have that, right?
Well, we said don't limit on text
I
selection.
think, right, I mean, as long as is that getting at what you're,
we said
Yeah,
that.
that does get to that.
Okay, and we said don't limit on text selection also.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Or
good.
time period. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
And we're including the media, infographics and things like that in the outcomes.
So really, to be fair, I probably should cross this off because we have that in there. But I added it.
Yeah.
I'm the note taker. Charter. I get to write what I want. I have 4 of them. Okay, so that's it? All right. Okay, so I feel like we have 2 things that will help guide the development of standards. We have graduate outcomes that tell us what we want to make sure we include in there for students. And then we have kind of this mess of, but items that are really, there's some structural pieces in there, but also there are some other pieces that kind of get to that. But so like structurally.
Structure versus content,
Yeah.
right? This is the content we want.
Yeah, how we want it to look, right? So we have those kind of 2 pieces that we'll be able to keep in mind as we move forward. So that's pretty good. And we have 4 sets of standards that we have evaluated for likes and dislikes, and we use that to help inform some of that. So that's good. Okay, so then I think I gotta look at my agenda. I guess what I need to ask is, I don't know that I actually feel that we need to do this, but it's listed on there, so I don't want to skip it because I want to be fair to the agenda that we set before. We had indicated that we would look at what we, like our evaluation of the standards that would be evaluated and compare that to our graduate outcomes. But I'm wondering if, I feel like I did that as I was going through, but I want to hear from everybody else. Do you feel like we need to have separate time for that, or are we good with moving beyond that?
Isn't that what we did when we went through those, compared them to those outcomes?
Right, well, that's what I was saying. I feel like that's what I did, but I just want to make sure that not everyone else is in my head. Yeah, yeah. Because I feel like that was what we did as that process, but we didn't clearly.
I mean, even having not done this yet, I feel like we really did both. Right? When we looked at each standard set, we looked at the content and we looked at the structure, and we talked about what do we like, what do we not like.
Yeah. The only thing that I saw on these, I'm looking at the time, under reading skills and body of love of literacy, it will promote lifelong reading, and then the same thing for writing. And to me, those are not skills; those are feelings or attitudes.
I agree.
So we don't have them in the standards, nor from my perspective, we want them.
It can go in the guiding principles, like
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe those belong more not with metacognitive skills, but they're kind of like the metacognitive skills.
Specific.
Right.
Do not state.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a note of mine.
Exactly. It could be an intent in the guiding principles.
What about writing? Composition. Yeah, same thing, but just one note about writing. What I might try to do is modify this and send it out then so that you have a clean version. I don't have a copy here in my hotel, I don't think, so I won't be copying it. But
I can do it tonight if you want.
But or you can change it. Okay. So I was just thinking that might be good, and then maybe we can separate the top part and then those two and put those in as like something for guiding principles, or even depending upon what we like or don't like, even in the narrative. We could go okay. All right. So I'm going to take us in a different direction now, and I'm going to ask that what we do is take a vote on what we're going to use as the foundational piece for developing new standards. And I'm going to do that because at the last meeting, we decided as a group that we were going to come in today and we would use the current Missouri Learning Standards as our foundation for developing the new standards. That was a consensus. That was not a vote. So instead of, and that wasn't even really on our agenda to vote today, what was on our agenda was to use them and begin developing standards.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this because I know there's a lot of feelings about this, what standards we use as our base, and I don't want emotions to get in the way of being able to then focus on the work. And so one of the things I was thinking is why do we have to just look at one? We have Massachusetts, we have Indiana, and we have Missouri. So we could kind of look at all three, each across the board at the same time, and accommodate both views here, and then apply it to that, and that might solve for the problem.
What becomes potentially tricky though, because I think the what comes next part, right, is looking at the specific standards. And so like what you'd be doing, you're right, I mean what we could do is you could say, here is this standard in the Missouri standard, and here's where this standard is in Massachusetts, and here's where it is in Indiana, and here's where it is in South Carolina. And now how do we merge those together into something we like?
Isn't that kind of what we did though over here, Nick, on the wall?
Well, what I would say is, yeah, most of those graduate outcomes are reflected in each of those 4 different standards documents. So, I mean, I guess the question moving forward, yeah, is what, to me, it's a practicality question, right? Do we want to, again, kind of write standards from the ground up, which would, you know what I mean? We would look at all of these different examples, we'd look at our graduate outcomes, and we try to figure out a vertical progression for each of them from kindergarten through 12th grade. Or
Well,
do we use...
I think that's a great idea. I like that idea, because we've been doing that all along. We did it even here this afternoon.
Well, we haven't looked at a standard level, but...
I don't want to overly complicate it. I see your point. What I'm suggesting is not that we. So what I wasn't thinking was that we would take a set of standards and revise just one set of standards. We would take everything that we know in our knowledge base,
right,
and we would look at them and we would put it through our own filter and litmus test of what we want and what we don't want in this great document that you've been on this morning, right? And so I'm not saying that like we're going to then recobble everything. I'm saying these standards are our launch pad for what we want. So to me, it doesn't matter if I'm more informed when I look at. I don't want to look at 5 or 6, but I'm looking at
the top ones,
top 2 or 3 or 4. 3 is probably the magic number. 2 is the magic number.
I don't even know that we've looked at the top 3 because I haven't looked at all the other feasible ones. And I personally didn't especially like either Massachusetts or most certainly South Carolina. And I don't like the Indiana 2008 one. So, I mean, all of that is a matter of personal opinion.
Right.
So, for me, I'd rather start with the standards that we have.
But what if we don't like those?
Then I think you should vote against doing that.
Well, I guess what I was
and
thinking
I
was.
think K through 5 needs to be brought in on this if we're deciding on what it's going to look like at the end, and we're deciding on a structure, and we're deciding on an organizational scheme of how it's going to, span from K to 12. I get we are the end game, but I would hate for us to go down this road of setting all this up only to meet with K-5 and they're in a different direction.
Well, to be fair though, elementary hasn't started, they didn't meet that.
But we just can't dismiss
They didn't
them.
meet last Tuesday, they didn't meet today. They have not done any of the work that we've done yet. They have not identified, and I don't even, they haven't identified exit outcomes for 5th graders. They haven't.
But that's, I don't think, a reason for us to say, hey, we're doing this and I'm for having that discussion, but as far as saying we're doing this and it's solid, and that at what point when we do meet with them does it become this struggle of, well, they want this and we want this, and then now you have tension between K-5 and 6-12. I don't want to see that happen, and I don't want to see any of our good conversations going to waste because we didn't take the time to bring them in at an earlier point, just as a preliminary thing, and then we can go our separate ways.
Well, here's what I was going to say about that is that one of the things that I was thinking of, I'm going to take things back a couple things. One thing I was thinking was I would sure like to be able to start with something and say, okay, here is this standard. Here's what I like about it and here's what I don't like about it. And then pull from the other 2 or whatever and say, these are pieces that I would put into it because this is what I like about that. And it fills the gap of what I don't like. And then I keep what I do like. Rather than trying to start from scratch, number 1, or take 3 or 4 across the board and say, okay, now how do I take these 3 or 4 and put them into one, and then make sure that I have a progression of that. That's number 1. So that was what I was thinking about, having like, this is what we're going to start with. Here's what we like, don't like. We're going to pull this in to add this to what we like, or take out what we don't like.
So you want to start with an existing framework? Start with some kind of
Yes,
framework.
number 1. That's the way I'm trying to think about how you handle this really large task. But the other piece is that about the K-5 is that one of the things I'm thinking is that it might be nice to have in mind, here's how we plan to approach this work, because they weren't here that full day Friday, and then they weren't here today, so they're going to be significantly behind where we are. And it might be nice to be able to go in and say, here's the work we have done, here's the graduate outcomes, here's the structure, or here's what we like about whatever structure, and here's how we plan to approach the work because we think this will be easier to get the ginormous task ahead of us done. So that we take something in there rather than, what I don't want to have happen is a slide back into an even lengthier conversation about almost rehashing all the things that we've hashed out. So I'd like to take in products and say, here's where we are, here's how we got there, and here's where we plan to go, so that we have something kind of concrete, because otherwise I feel like we're gonna end up spinning our
I also think
wheels.
it's important to remember that we want to begin with the end in mind, which we did, and there it is.
Yes.
And I realize, even though I've never taught below 10th grade, so I think, that said, I'm going to assume, because I can vaguely remember my kids were little too, that there were teachers in 4th grade and 5th grade, but certainly ones in 1st and 2nd grade who were dealing with such different people from people who are 18, that it may be hard for them to begin with the end in mind. But I also think part of our job is to remind them, when you went from high school to college, did you have any wake-up calls? Did you have anything that you really wish you had been ready for that you weren't? Instead of saying to them, now let's start at the beginning, and then if we can catch up by the end, that's fine. No, that's not what it's about. And I think that those K through 5 standards that are there, they can look at those and do what they want with them as well. We eventually have to have some kind of vertical alignment, yes, but there must be a reason that this law mandated a 6 through 12 and a K through 5. There was a reason for that. Those people think differently who are teaching at different levels.
Well, I guess what I would like is to be able to, again, go in with a product so that for a group that maybe hasn't arrived at much, because I'm not sure what they've arrived at, but I'm making gross assumptions, which is not fair, but that's what I'm doing. I have a hard time thinking about vertical alignment articulation of a standard when we are divided. So I think that what I'd like to be able to do is say, here's where we're going, because we got the back end. So that's where we're going. And here's how we plan to arrive there. How does this fit? How do we work together to make sure that because we can't take them there from 6 through 12. We have to take them there K through 12, if that's where we're going. So then how can we work together to make sure that when we get back together, because we probably don't want to all sit in the same room and work on the standards all at the same time, because that's a really big group and that would take a long time. I'm not sure.
And that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know it's not what you're saying.
Conversation.
I'm just trying to think of what will best move the work forward, and also thinking about those folks, how can we help them along? Because I feel like we've done so much work that they could benefit from. The conversations have been really, really good and really so focused on what's good for students and then what will help teachers. So I think if we can help out that group by sharing that, we'll be in good shape.
We think that they will find it a little condescending.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they ultimately are their own group, and they have the autonomy to do what they want to do too. And I totally agree. As a coordinator, as a teacher, that is problematic if K-5 and 6-12 don't jive. But I also think until both groups have had a chance, like you said, to actually start doing something and getting something in motion, there's no way we can ever jive.
And the law says we will do this, they will do that, and obviously at some point that has to be vertically aligned, but that is not prescribed. What's prescribed is we create the standards that we see as meeting what graduates need to look like to be ready for college, career.
So we could end up with a revamp of Missouri Learning, and they could end up with a new copy of Massachusetts.
Right. But usually we have to figure that out.
Well, I mean, I guess technically that could happen, but that was my point. Was I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but because I kind of feel like.
But again,
I don't want to lose any work, and I don't want to go backwards. So maybe there's a compromise with, okay, we said we're meeting with them tomorrow sometime, or.
I think so, although I think they're going to have representative bar meeting.
But it also doesn't make sense, and it's the same thing that I said last week, is that we have no idea what purpose we are meeting them for. They didn't tell us why they wanted to meet. They just said, let's meet and talk about some things. So
Well, they did
say
say
about
Massachusetts, that we are really interested in that.
okay,
Did they not say that?
right? But I'm just not sure why we need to be part of that conversation.
Right.
If we take out the names of any of the standards and we just look at what we want kids to be able to do, if they write standards and we write standards and we're calling them something different Missouri Learning Standards or Concord. And they're calling them something different than either of those things. When we get together, I'm going to bet that they're not that different. I'm just going to bet that if we go our way, if they go their way, when we get together, I'm just pretty darn certain that we're not going to be apples and oranges. That it might be red and green, but it's not going to be apples and oranges. So,
well, that was the premise of,
right.
you have to remember when the governors first met and came up with these, I think it was, I don't remember, something exactly, but it doesn't matter where. But this person said, you know, knowing how to read and comprehend what you read, to interpret what it says, in Missouri is not really that different from knowing how to interpret what it says in
Right, and I
or in
don't,
Florida.
that's
pretty
that's,
similar.
but I don't think that's what provokes people. I think what provokes people is the fact that you're stripping away local control. You know, everybody wants to keep their own stuff in their own state and even in their own district. And if you've got nationalized standards, people don't want nationalized standards.
well, we're not going to anymore.
We won't.
Because they're not going to be the same.
So, Lindsay, I guess, I think what I've heard you say, so help me make sure that I'm hearing you right, is that maybe the best path is to keep on trucking forward, and then when K-5 has some substance and we have some substance, we can look at them and say, okay, now how can we take these and articulate them vertically?
Do we know they don't have anything? Has anybody found that out?
Well, no, but we don't have
They
anything.
came here the last afternoon they met, right, it was last Monday, and they came in and they said, hey, we're kind of looking at these Massachusetts standards, and then they adjourned, and they have not met since then. So presumably, right, that is where their work has left.
I think you can look at their work, it is posted, not any documents, but the video of the meeting, which should be the work that they've done, is posted on the DESE website.
I want us to just make sure that we all understand that when we leave here on whatever day, hopefully not in July, when we leave here, we are not going to have Common Core standards. And I don't think that's what anybody in this room wants.
Right.
The bill clearly says that we are not going to have the same thing that we have now. And that's certainly not what I want. Any standard that I've ever seen that comes from Missouri can be improved. I'm honored to have a chance to be able to work on those and to say, as a classroom teacher, here's how I would improve them. I don't get into how they were packaged and all of that crap because I really just don't care. It does not matter to me because the only thing that matters to me is what I do for those 48 minutes with my kids in my room every single day. That's it. I don't care about who else. I don't care who tells me to do it. It just doesn't matter to me. And so I just have this feeling that when we sit down and we talk about that and only that, and we leave all of that other stuff out there, and then we expect the younger teachers to be able to do that, to be able to do that, to be able to do that as well, that when we get together, they're going to be pretty similar because we're all educated professionals. And we all want the same thing for kids. So it does not matter to me what we call them. I don't really care. And I don't care where they come from.
And there are inherently going to be some differences too. We're not going to talk about foundational reading standards and phonics, and so that's just a given.
Well, right. I don't think there's anybody in this room that is, I don't have Common Core tattooed anywhere on me. It's not something that I live and die by. It is the standards by which I've been teaching for a few years, and I have grown through the process to love because I've seen what they've done to my students. Can they be improved? Absolutely. I look forward to that. I appreciate educational discourse and looking at all of these other things and being able to say, oh, well, Massachusetts does it like this. I think I can take something from it. The same way that I use Pinterest to become a better teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Because I know that what I do is not perfection. I know that. I know that these Common Core standards aren't perfection. But you know what? They're here in front of me. I'm going to use them until somebody gives me something better. And that's what we're here to do. So I don't care what they're called. I'm eliminating all of that bias, and I'm just saying, you know what? Let's move forward. Let's start looking at what they say. Let's take that first standard and say, we like this, we don't like this, let's rewrite it, and let's go.
I just want to go back to, as a parent, again, we've been using, and most schools have, you have to statistically look, because you guys all are, all about what the research says. Our scores tell us the story.
Well, let me tell you my story because you weren't there.
But let me just say
you weren't there last week.
My issue is just simply that I think that if we start somewhere to start with standards that are showing us, I mean, through the scores, that they're dropping statewide in every subject, I would rather start with a set of standards that are copyrighted and owned by two private trade organizations. I'd rather not start with that platform, and then maybe take the best parts of Common Core and eliminate that. And that's where I'm coming from, is that for me on the outside, and I know you're a great teacher, and I can hear that, but that's where I am, is that I see, when I was just a novice, look at statewide, all the scores, and I see what I perceive and interpret Common Core has done. I have to go on record as saying, I don't want to start from that base. I'm not saying we can't use a lot of different elements from that work for you because you're the one in the trenches and in the field and you get it. I'm totally open to that. But to start with something that I interpret, because the bill also talks about content experts and their interpretation of Common Core standards. And we have research, I do look at that. And so, I mean, although your opinion, I mean, I totally appreciate, and there's great elements of it, I would rather just not start from a flawed.
Well, to be fair, have we looked up what scores did in 2001 under these?
Can I address
Do we know what scores did?
Again, I don't think we should look at standards with assessments.
Right.
Kansas has not abandoned the Common Core standards. Those are still the Kansas standards, but they're writing their own tests, both and out of KU. We can do the same thing, but that's not our job anyway, to figure that part out.
But we want to start with something that is showing us through scores that it's not. But I mean, how else are you going? That's how we're going to measure everything. Is how effective the standards are by the scores.
The test did not measure the progress on Common Core standards. Right. The test measured the progress on the GLEs and the CLEs.
Right.
But yes, they were. They were teaching the Common Core. You haven't. So if you're going to measure progress towards the standards,
and math has not been Common Core in my
Can I make a comment about that, about the scores?
Yeah.
What I was thinking about that when you were talking about the drop is that when we made some changes in our district that were pretty significant, and we raised some expectations that were not raised before, we saw a dip in scores across the board, and that happens. And so one of the things that I was thinking of is what I don't want to do, and I'm not saying that this is what you're saying, but I thought about it as you were saying it. What I don't want to do is lower the expectation of the standards to make sure that the scores seem to be okay. No, that's what I'm saying. I said you're not saying that, but I end up going there thinking I don't want to go there. What I want to make sure that we do is we have standards that meet. Well, I think in some cases I was thrilled by the raising of expectations for some things because I know what my kids can do. I know what my kindergartners can do, and they can write really beautiful stories with a few words and a picture that are just awesome that the GLEs never asked my kids to do, So now we have these expectations where, and when we raise the bar, kids will meet them. But I think when we raise the bar and we have too many things where the bar is raised, that's where we end up with problems with teachers. So I think that if we can make sure that whatever we write keeps the bar high or elevates it, because I almost think that we have to think about what our outcomes are and it's pretty lofty what we want for kids. And they are entering a world that's requiring them to do many of those things. So we need to make sure that we keep the bar there.
Most of our students are going to take the ACT, and now that's
they all have to now.
Exactly. Yeah. But most of them are going to, in any case, the way it is currently, because they have some plan to go to college or some higher education they want to pursue. A lot of our students are starting to take they are taking dual credit classes in English language arts, and those are firmly rooted in argument-based writing and reading argumentative text neologism. They are taking AP exams. The AP line test is aligned to the dual credit courses, the AP Lit to an even higher level class, a lot of times a 200 level college class. If we decide that our standards shouldn't be addressing those kinds of things, I think a lot of parents are likely to be, and students for that matter, and will look back and from a perspective of being a little beyond age 18 will be disappointed that they were not being asked to meet higher standards.
My daughter's ranked first in her class and literally said she is a
sophomore took 3 college classes last year because, and I appreciate that my school offers that she can be challenged, but it's not with the core content. I mean, she's taking AP college classes, you know, as a junior, and I appreciate that we offer that. But so I'm totally with you. I don't want any of my kids sitting bored. I want the bar raised very, very high. But I personally just, like, I think your point was so great to bring her in here as a high schooler or any high school kid and say, okay, interpret, what does it look like to you? I just feel like as I can speak to her, I have a freshman son also, but I'm not, I mean, she's a junior. So my experience, you know, with what I've seen, but I just, again, I agree we need to raise the bar, but I don't know.
But you are aware that the Common Core standards, whatever we want to call them, the ones that were created in 2009 and 10, that they are totally aligned with other College Board outcomes, such as AP exams, SAT. Okay, just want to make sure.
Good university.
The other thing that is,
Right,
it's
right.
just, it's funny, I mean, it's funny, like as we were going through the Massachusetts standards, I was highlighting, there are dozens of them that verbatim, exact quote, are Common Core standards. Like, this is one of the documents the Common Core people used and literally pulled, let's use this, I mean, just like we're talking about doing. I mean, again, I think the math debate is a whole different debate with the literacy standards. I think they're all saying roughly the same thing, so.
Well, what if, go ahead.
I think we need to keep in mind, it's not necessarily, I think the standards are rigorous and they're quality. But when when teachers try to implement those and the materials, I think that's what sometimes causes the misconception and the difficulty.
So, I'm sorry.
What baseline would you like to see us, I mean, or
You know
just
what?
start on our own? I
And
mean,
as far as that goes, and again, just my point of reference as like not an expert like you are, but we're from the outside looking in, understanding 1490 and how much of an issue it was for so many people. For us to start with that baseline of the Common Core standards, I'm not saying we can't bring in different elements. I'm totally good with that. But I feel like if we can start from a different baseline and create something that's really all our own, I think that just for the perception point, I mean, and again, maybe it's like Liz said, 2 documents or 3 documents. I mean, I don't want to make it, but we can.
Well, what is the baseline you recommend?
Yeah.
That was her question.
that was my
You mean
question.
like whether it be the Indiana standards or?
Yes, or-
And honestly, I just got appointed to this last night, so I can't speak to that intelligently. And I can't, so I don't know, but what I can say is that to go with what's now the Missouri Learning Standards based on what I see as a parent, and that's scores, and that is the fact that they're owned and copyrighted, I have a problem with that. I'd rather start from a different baseline and then take a lot of what that is good, but that's just my
Can I
perspective.
just say real quick, sorry.
Please do.
I think maybe there's a lot of contention right now with what we start with, and maybe we don't have to have one of these as a base. Maybe, like I said, I know a lot of people don't see right now that we need to meet with K-5. And I'm talking, when I say meet with them, I'm not saying let's dig into the weeds and figure, I'm saying let's just get a general feel for what they're planning on doing. But what if maybe we didn't say we're starting with one of these documents, but knowing everything we've done here today, we at least decide on our strands. That way we could go in there to them and say, because if we're taking whether this document or South Carolina or Massachusetts, you were right. A verb is a verb is a verb. You know, using that kind of thing. So if we at least had our strands, it's not going to kill us to start plugging in important things that we want and start using our own wording for those strands. That way we could go to them and say, here's what we're thinking with strands, and then I don't want to cause this same kind of uneasy contention with them by saying we started with this document and then have arms going up and people saying I don't want to work with you. So maybe we take a different approach for now, just for that.
Yeah, I don't know what point we are ready to move something and people vote, but I personally would really like to see the informational reading, the literacy, the literature, literary reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language strands, because those are the ones that we all agree.
Right.
So
that's
Can I ask you to repeat those, Maradella?
Okay, the informational reading strand, the literary reading strand, writing strand, reading and listening strand, language strand.
Thank you.
Can I take us a different direction for just a moment? This is just kind of how my ring works, so if you don't like it, you can say we don't like it, and I'm fine with that, because we're going to work with consensus. Okay. I would really like to know what we would like to have when we walk out the door on Friday. You know, like I would like to know that, and this is just, I'm kind of outcome based, clearly. So I just want to have, I mean, not like we want to have, you know, standards written for this, or not so much that, but what can we feel really good about having accomplished when we walk out the door, and that we're prepared to do when we walk back in the door on October 20th. And I don't mean specifically, you know, I'm not going to write it down, but I'd like to have, I'm thinking about that in terms of, it will help me think, what do we need to actually have clearly identified before we leave tonight? And then what will we work on tomorrow? And then what does that mean for a conversation with any other group in the building, or not in the building, or wherever we are? So is that okay, or is that not okay?
Well, if we take what you've got here on this agenda, and we just tomorrow pick up where we left off tonight, I think that's a great place to start. Just getting 2 or 3 different sets of standards, taking the strands like he was talking about, and start plugging in what we want based off of our, you know, our goal, our end goal here.
Do you think it's
And
possible?
I don't think it's going to be all get done tomorrow by any stretch. I hope that's not. Is that
I'm
what
just
you're
trying to
thinking?
pick a new starting point.
No, I'm just trying to think about where we're going, and what I don't want to do is engage in I don't want to engage in a argument with K5 about what standards we're using. And I feel like if we wait until tomorrow and we say we're going to pick up on number 7 tomorrow, when we do with K5, it's just going to be
Well, you suggested
how many people are in the room, and I don't really want to
You
go
suggest you picking up with step 6 tomorrow? Was that your comment?
7.
Okay.
Okay.
To me, it comes back to the logistics, all right? Let's say we identify 40 standards, right, that we want to do, right? To do a vertical progression for 40 standards, even from the 6 to 12 level, I mean, do the math there, right? 6 times 40. That is an insane amount of work to try to get done in volunteer committees between now and next October, even in a year span. That is an insane amount of work to go by standard, look at all these different documents, then create a progression for each of those. I would much rather pick one of these, and if it's Indiana, it's Indiana. If it's Massachusetts, it's Massachusetts. But let's pick a starting place and then pick away at it, because that will increase efficiency by 150%.
I don't want to think of this as something we're rushing through. I think of it as, I don't want to disappoint, I guess, the citizens and taxpayers who were in support of the bill. And so I feel like I want to take my time, and I know it takes time. You know, good standards in states have taken years to do this. We are under a time constraint, but I don't ever want to feel like, well, these were just thrown together because we're under a crunch. But I don't know.
I don't think being efficient implies throwing them together. I think Nick's right. Let's pick one. We can draw from all the others.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. But if we are constantly just trying to integrate and things are in slightly different places and we're flipping through a lot of papers, I think it's better to pick one and to start with that as our baseline.
Can we not just get, I mean, I hear what everyone's saying, but feedback, even like, not just to measure and take the temperature of K5, what's the harm in that? Because, I mean, to me, not asking them.
We're not going to
what
be
are
done tomorrow. We're going to get started.
We have to do what's best for us, because you plan backwards, you start with your outcomes and you spiral backwards. And we have to do what works well for us, you know, and then have our conversations.
Here's how my mind works. Taking your line. If I look at one standard and I look at a vertical progression, I'm boxed in. Whether it's Missouri, and I'm not at Missouri or Massachusetts or South Carolina, I at least want to have something else to look at.
Right.
Right?
I agree.
And so we don't have. So I guess what I'm saying, and then I agree with your perception point. We're here to revise academic standards. So if we can leave the room saying we didn't start with the status quo, we went over here, but then we used the Missouri standards to compare it to, we're good to go. We're basically doing the same thing. I mean, everybody wins. And what I'm trying to do is, well, I don't know if everybody wins, but at least advance where we are today. So, I would suggest that we consider thinking about voting on something along those lines.
Here's another option. Now I'm just throwing this out. Some people want to use Common Core as a base, some people want to use Massachusetts. All right, Indiana, in their recent standards, used both. They looked at the Common Core, they looked at Massachusetts, all right, and they pulled them all together.
In the 2014?
Yes.
Well, they've got the Indiana Academic Standards 2014, 2006, the Common Core State Standards, and the differences within them.
Right. So they pulled them all together. So that way it would be a base if you start, and you don't even have to look at the comparison. You can go straight to the Indiana 2014 standards. And they took a whole bunch of standards and pulled them together. So that way we're not starting with the older Massachusetts standards or the Common Core. You're starting with a group of standards that are updated, they've been looked at, they're trying to do the exact same thing that we're doing now. And we're not starting from scratch.
So we've got a baseline.
There's a baseline, and then you can look at
So
it.
you're suggesting that the current Indiana standards become our baseline now?
That would be my suggestion if
Can
we
we
can't reach
do
a
a little
compromise.
research on that first? Because I don't know, and I don't know where I've been reading this, but there's a lot of stuff out there saying that those are junk.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually,
it matters.
Then everything we're using is junk.
but that's my point.
I mean, Jesse, over and over again, they flew in the Fordham experts to testify on behalf of the standards. Fordham actually has written a review on the new Indiana standards that is not favorable.
They have to look at the
So
ELA.
I think that if we're gonna give deference.
They have to look, but they have to look at two things. Number one, when they rated, you have to look at the ELA standards, not the math standards. Our job is ELA. The second thing you need to look at is you have to look at what criteria they're used to evaluating those on. All right? And I don't know that they've actually evaluated the new 2014 Indiana standards for sure. You know?
A couple of months.
Yes,
They haven't
I
been
don't
used.
know that they've evaluated the 2014 standards. I know that they evaluated the older standards, and you need to look at the criteria they use to evaluate those on.
I think you're coming up with something that's middle of the road.
It is, it's middle of the road.
And that's,
It's-
we're gonna have to find something.
And you guys, we don't care how they're evaluated, we're gonna evaluate them ourselves. That's what we're gonna use right up there.
Can we have some time to, because I've not looked at those.
If you go to the 2014 Indiana standards, and it will say on the bottom of the standards, they took the Massachusetts, they took the Nebraska, they took the National Council of Teachers of English, and they put them all together, and take a look at it. I know there's a lot of them, but at least it's a starting point to where you can take out and crunch if you don't like them.
Can we look at that? Can we look at that before making that kind of?
At least it's a starting
Or
point.
can we maybe go home tonight and say that's what we do and we start right there first thing in the morning?
I have 184.
And I don't feel like I want to fix something I haven't had a chance to look
I'm
at.
not against it, I'm not against it. I just want time.
I need some time.
But guys, we need to come at this with an open mind.
Could I just,
I agree.
I think we've talked and talked and talked, but so now, just to kind of gauge what's going on in the room, I would like to move that we use the Missouri standards as our basis, and I would like to vote on that and see where we stand.
I second the motion.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Nancy and
Meredith.
Adela.
Nancy was, and Meredith was second. Thank you.
I still think we need some
Well,
discussion.
yes, I do too. I think we need time to. We don't, I have not even seen that.
Then you
I have no
can,
idea
then
what
you
I'm
could
voting
vote
on.
no right now.
But
She
it's
said
not-
Missouri,
that's not-
whoa, she said Missouri learning standards. She didn't say Virginia, or what, Indiana, I don't know where I got Virginia. Why not? I'm starting to get real tired.
I guess what I'd like to, one of my questions is, we're just talking about the structure, the framework.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a template.
Yes,
A template.
Right.
That is it. Yes.
That's it.
That was why my other
Has any-
suggestion was those 4 strands, or those 5 strands.
I just don't want to be, I'm sorry, but if you look at, I guess, a lot of states are trying to do right now what we're doing right here, and some states have said they did it. And the things that are coming out aren't favorable. I don't want to be laughing stock going, hey, just look at what Missouri did. They just rebranded or whatever. I'm not willing to put my name on a rebrand.
Okay,
Sorry.
but when we go back and we look at these standards, and we look at 2008 Massachusetts, and we look at South Carolina
I get that,
2008,
but
I'm
why
not
couldn't we
sure if it's
compromise?
possible for us not to rebrand it. For someone out there not to look at them and say, it's just rebranded. I'm just not sure that that is possible. Because the standards are, even if you look at the Common Core standards and you look at the GLEs, there are so many similarities. And there are so many similarities between the Common Core standards and any state that we choose. I can look at those states and I can say, oh my gosh, all of these, they are Common Core standards.
I just know right now, this is a very, for much of the state, I know there's strong feelings in here about it, and I get that and I understand that, but I also know for people across the state of Missouri, this is a very contentious document, and if it gets reported, I mean, the stuff coming out of these meetings is already, when you read the Post-Dispatch in St. Louis,
I'm well aware.
you know, they were saying, hey, they accused us as being, you know, erase and throwing paste eaters.
So there's a motion, guys, there's a motion, so I'm gonna follow. I think there's been plenty of discussion as far as, so I don't think we have to clarify understanding through discussion, so I think we're okay there. We have a motion and a second to take a vote on using the Missouri Learning Standards as the, baseline for developing new Missouri Learning Standards. Is that a clear statement? Okay, so what I need then is all in favor of using the Missouri Learning Standards as the baseline for developing the new Missouri Learning Standards to raise your hand.
Please give me a moment.
Okay, all those, oh wait, do you want hands up still?
Do you want me to record names?
Yes, I'm sure.
Yes, we want
Okay.
to.
Sure.
Give me just a minute then. I have Carrie Speeders. I have Carrie Risner. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I have Jenna Scott. Just a second, sorry, I made a mistake. Jenna Scott. I have Ann Franklin. Maradella Carter. Nancy Hagfield.
H-A-G.
Hadfield. I think it's just spelling it every time. I have Nick Primer. I have Lindsay Thompson. Is there anybody that I missed? Okay, thank you.
And of course, I need to say, I'm all opposed.
So I have 5 opposed. I have Jill Noble. I have Stacy Shore. I have Casey Polish. I made Nick's Polish. I can relate. I don't have to go with it anymore.
My name is
House.
And Elizabeth Lauer. Did I miss anyone? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then I would say then the next item that we need to discuss is what are we going to do going forward? So starting tomorrow, 8 o'clock, we're here from 8 to 3. We should set our agenda for how we will proceed. So the recommendation was that we would start by deciding, and I think maybe this, we can do it today if you want to, I don't care. I frankly could use a nap, so if you want to wait till tomorrow to do it, it's fine by me. To look at what we want our strands to be, because we indicated that we wanted few strands, that's it, few, that align to our outcomes. So we would need to do that. And then my question would be, I guess, chart and agenda. Would you want to do that tomorrow, or would you want to do that today? And I feel like one thing that needs to happen is that I will do, and I don't care if you do it or not, it's really up to you, you're all adults, but one of the things I will do is take the time to look at some of those other documents that we've been talking about referencing today, that I have not looked at I don't really know why I wanted to be Virginia. I don't know.
Maybe that's a.
Virginia has their own because they had it certified by their own state college and career
I did read something
readiness.
about
That
that
is
the other day.
twice.
They got
I don't know.
that's probably.
Well, maybe
what
I
you're
should just
thinking.
look at that. Maybe
Because
that's
they
why.
said, as long as your higher ed can certify that it meets college and career readiness, Virginia went ahead and did that.
Okay, I really don't know why I'm doing that, but anyway, so, thank you. So what I need to know is, do you want to do strands today? Do you want to do strands tomorrow? You want to start with that? So just start an agenda for tomorrow? Okay. Okay, so, let's do that. We're gonna go ahead and work through this, hi ladies, we're gonna work through our agenda for tomorrow, and then we'll chat with you, so that way we can make sure we get down what we want to get down. So, what color? What color? Anyone have a color preference?
Pink.
Really?
Sorry.
And black. Okay. All right, so this is agenda. What's tomorrow's date? 10 to 3? 3, we are meeting 8 to 3. Okay, so, tomorrow, do we start by just a joint conversation on strands? Okay. So identify, oh man, my writing's certainly going downhill. Desired strands. Okay? I'm going to try to use 2 different colors. To make it pretty. Okay? What do we need to do after we've identified our desired strand? So I'm not sure.
But I think the question is, so do we want to meet with elementary? And do we want to do that as a whole joint group? Do you want to do that?
I thought we did agree already.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We just have to set a time,
Okay.
so that's what I guess.
So I guess what I want to know is, what do we want to get out of the day tomorrow, and then let's figure out what time that makes, is that okay?
Yeah.
We'll put it in there, okay, because I want to have an idea, I really want to have a clear idea of where we want to end the day, so that we can aim for that, or if we're not, then I can be thinking, how do we end it in a place that makes sense, so that we can start again on the 20th, so that I can cut it off, if we need to cut, you know what I'm saying? So it's like a logical cutoff, as opposed to we just left that standing, now it's 2 weeks, so.
If we identify desired strands and conceptual areas underneath each strand, would that be a logical goal?
Explain what you mean.
Yeah.
Or maybe the narrative that goes along with it, just not sure.
No, but our strands are like, it would be like a writing strand.
Right.
Yeah.
I like
Like
reading.
informational reading.
Yeah, so like.
Subtitles.
Right, so subtitles. So if we-
Sub-clusters underneath the
Yeah.
strand.
So if we identify
So like
desired
speaking and
strands,
listening is speaking.
and then clusters under each one.
Like it has collaborative distraction. Like that, okay, I got it,
yeah.
okay, so identify,
Subtitles or clusters or whatever under strands. And you can call it whatever you want.
In the baseline document, those under reading standards, for example, are key ideas and skills.
Yeah.
Craft instruction,
And-
integration of knowledge, so.
And we
you
can
wanna
look at
change that up and
Massachusetts,
how-
South Carolina, Common Core, you know, I mean, we use the Common Core as a base and then go outside as needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, supplement. Say, hey, I like this better over here.
Value week modified.
okay, I don't think I need to say it, but we're gonna constantly be looking at that and looking at that and looking at that and looking at that, right?
Right.
That's just understood as part of this.
Right,
Okay.
I mean, we can look at any one part.
Yes.
Right.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Right, no, what I'm saying is we'll be constantly looking at, like, as we move through, we go, okay, here's what we want for our strands. Do they get to our graduate outcomes?
Yeah.
Yes or no? It's like, so I don't need to put on here that we will then now go back and we'll look at that. Okay, so we just know, we'll check ourselves? Okay. So strands and then identify clusters. And then I just really put every other word that I heard you say about that, so that we can call it whatever we want in our here. What comes after that?
I think we would be at a place to talk with elementary. I don't know
Yes.
what their day looks like, but
Right.
I think that would be a good point.
To talk, yeah, to talk.
If it's mutually
Say,
beneficial,
this is the
agreeable.
direction, here are the direction that we're going, how are you guys?
Is this what you think that we would accomplish tomorrow, and that would be it?
I don't think that's gonna take, maybe jumping to conclusions here, I don't think that's going to take more than an hour or two's worth of discussion. Personally
But if we
speaking.
do some articulation, if we accomplish that, and then we articulate, and we look at, make sure that we've got it really the way we want it, I think that's a great accomplishment.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, what are we articulating, Jim? Articulate these
well,
with looking at other
Our-
states?
No.
Strands and clusters? No, okay.
No,
let's clarify
we
that.
decided we would use one document as a framework.
Right.
Then we brainstorm that, and we can actually look and see, are we happy with our clusters? Do we have any other ideas? And then you would look at your other documents to see if there's anything that you like, that you would want to bring in.
So that's the articulation?
Yes.
That's all I'm saying?
Right.
Okay.
So you don't want to bring in any other states?
No,
Well,
that's part of
you
the
know,
articulation.
you
bring it up.
No.
Yeah.
If,
No, we would definitely, that was what we said, we would identify the strands we want, we'll look at whatever and see what's the
Yeah.
best.
Well,
What do
absolutely.
you-
And-
Same
right,
thing for a
exactly.
cluster or a
Exactly.
category or a
First, I need to
subtitle or
look
whatever.
at other-
Yes.
I mean, that's just the way I
Yeah.
work. So, like,
So,
but we'll have that as our-
my question is that, do you think that is the end goal for the day, or is there more work that can and should be done after that,
Well, I think it
on
depends
this,
on
on the day?
Thanks for how
Are
long
we
it
going
takes,
to
but-
put,
Well,
when
I'm
we
trying to
speak
figure out
of
what's next.
time
Yeah,
limits,
right.
are we going to put a time limit on our meeting with the younger group? And what, I just don't want to go in there and I don't want to do all of
Okay,
this
so
again.
I think
Yeah,
we're in
that's a
here,
good idea.
right?
I think it's time.
Well,
You're
and
not
the thing
coming
is,
back?
I don't think, let's see.
You guys are working.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, which one are you guys in? Social studies.
Oh, okay,
I
I'm sorry, I
need
just
to
thought you
remember
put that, like,
we
oh,
are
here,
two
okay.
different work groups.
Right.
And, well, okay, and what I'm saying is,
Yeah. What do we want?
eventually we have to coordinate some stuff, and I think we have to understand, each group probably needs to understand where the other one's coming from. But I don't see a reason that what we're doing isn't what we're doing. In other
Right.
words, we aren't, we've made a vote. We don't
So,
need
well,
to
I guess
change that
what-
because some other.
What I would like to know is what do we think, let's stop thinking about this and start thinking about what's the next step. Because then we need to think about, is that next step, would it be feasible to even try to get to the next step
Essentially.
tomorrow,
To me-
or not, you know what I'm saying? So let's talk about what is the next step after we were to do those two things.
To me, that's the last of the big picture stuff, and then you're ready to go standard by standard, and I would say just let's pick a strand we want to start with. After we identify what the strands are, do you want to start with reading, do you want to start with writing?
So here was my question, and again, this is like a couple times a day I've done this, and you kind of look at me like I'm crazy or stupid, and that's fine, you should, because I'm starting to feel a little bit on the, whatever, silly side, I guess, really, is where I am. What I'm wondering about that is, does it make sense, because we have a nice sized group, to take we'll take reading, we'll take writing,
no, because you
All right,
lose your
Rob.
integration.
I like
Okay,
where you're
I'm
going,
good.
but
I was just thinking for time and efficiency. I'm good with that. That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Two
Yes.
questions. So back to your earlier questions, just on object. We are, so what I've heard was we already voted to meet with K through 5, and I heard a suggestion to put a time limit on it.
Well, I just want it to be here's what we're doing, what are you guys doing, bam.
So do we want to put a 45-minute time limit? We have a vote on that, or we need a vote? We have
30.
30.
We will see you from 9:30 to 10.
so I don't know that we can mandate that. I mean, I know
I don't
we
know
were
if we can say
invited,
what time.
and I don't know.
Well, I'm not here. We can talk about it. So we just need to, yeah.
We can tell them that we would love to meet with them, we only have a certain amount of time in our day, and we're not ready.
What's good for you?
Well, and I think what would be nice,
Yeah.
well, I think what would be fair is to say, we would be, like, we don't want to interrupt this work, and for them to say, we don't want to interrupt this work, so let's make sure that we don't disrupt anybody's, flow, and, so, okay.
Well, clarify, did they communicate with you? Because they communicated with me for whatever reason. I think you two. They communicated with the three of us, and I forwarded that to you. My response to them was that this group was meeting today and hadn't yet formulated a plan, and that we would communicate with them a time that would be most appropriate.
What time are they coming in the morning?
I believe it's 9 o'clock.
It says 10 to 3.
Let me look at the email.
On the
from
website.
them.
Can we just switch it?
Well, they also thought according to the website they were meeting in another building, and I made sure that they knew that the website says they're meeting in this building, just because I didn't want us to get in trouble. Let me tell you what it says. So she communicated with the three of us. Says, hey ladies, I've been waiting to hear a finalization on a planetary meeting. Okay, a planetary meeting has not been finalized. We will plan on meeting Friday 9 to 4 on the first floor of the Truman Building, but it's not. It's the first floor of this building. So 9 to 4. And again, my response was that I would pass this on, that you would be meeting here, and that we would indicate a
Did
time that might
we
be
designate
appropriate.
Carrie, she's our liaison, we elected her to work with the leader of that group and set the time.
Would it make sense not to interrupt workflow to meet with them either right before we plan to break for lunch or right after we get back from lunch, just so that both groups have a block of time?
Yeah.
And give them a time, frame that we have available.
Sure, yeah, we'll do that. That sounds like a great idea. Anyone
And
have?
do we know where we're meeting, because we can't do it here? I mean, I just
I
wondered
thought
if
when
we
they
need to
came
talk
up
about that.
last time, they said their
She
space
worked
is
that
big
out.
enough.
Okay,
bigger.
let Carrie figure out, yeah, the logistics.
Go
The
Carrie.
meeting place and time.
You were gonna watch the movie
Since
tonight
the
at the
9 o'clock
hotel, right?
meeting tomorrow in the Capitol, that some of us are supposed to, at least one person from our group is supposed to go and listen to. I don't know, Kurt Barr's going to go through the antennas of L. And so, does anyone want to designate someone to go over there, or does anyone want to go over there and figure out for the group, or do we care?
I have to leave at 11 o'clock tomorrow to be in Louisiana in the afternoon, Missouri.
Missouri.
I said I would like to go.
And then why don't you, she can be our person, go and report back to us.
Is that okay?
Yeah, oh, that's fine.
Okay.
What
so
is
that-
this? Those are my two logistics.
Those are your two logistics, okay.
Representative Barr's holding a meeting for, some committee members got emailed and some didn't, I
To
don't.
go through
You
the
guys have had one earlier.
guidelines that are now statute, I mean, I think we've been over those.
Is that a plenary meeting?
Yeah.
I have
This
no
is
idea
how
what meeting.
plenary meeting tomorrow?
I don't know, I don't think it said that.
He
It
just
says-
put out a letter saying committee members can come listen to me talk about the agenda of the building.
I've got
I can pull it up.
Stacy, I have a copy.
So I can't pull it up.
I have mine.
So I got an email.
Okay, so, back to tomorrow. Back to tomorrow, so, the next step will be to just start identifying standards to go with our clusters. Is that what that's the next step? So we'll,
Yeah, I would recommend.
This is what I got. You want me to forward it to you?
Please, forward to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you
that'd
know
be
what,
great.
and then he sent a later one that came out very short, just one paragraph.
I can forward it.
okay, so you have both of the communications? Okay,
Mine's
so,
without it.
okay, so Lindsay is going, Lindsay's going to forward the message,
Okay, she did, yeah, she did.
the message that came from Representative Barr's office. There's two. One is a description of the meeting, and I believe the second one has a time or a location or something that was left off, a date that was left off of the original. So there's that.
The first one just said, we'll see you at 9 a.m.
Okay. So okay, if I could bring you back, we have 15 minutes left on our time. And we have a couple of things that we said we would do. We'll definitely meet with K5 tomorrow. And Casey said she was gonna go to the meeting over at, right?
I'm gonna go too.
I don't think it was necessarily the designate, I mean, I plan on going,
Are we supposed to call it?
Well, I don't think.
I don't think it's a requirement.
It shouldn't be required by an outside influence, right?
Well, this morning someone asked me if I was going, and I said I got communication yesterday, pretty late in the evening, but I did, from Senator Duncey's office with some additional clarification. I feel like I'm good to go, so I'm not going to go because I'm ready to ready to dig in, and we agreed from 8 to 3. So if you want to go, that's not going to hurt my feelings. It's okay. That's the reason I'm not going to go, because I feel like I have the clarification I need. So I'm good.
Why are we getting piecemeal?
I don't know.
Legislature.
Well, nobody's running, and nobody, I mean, for the bill's intent, right, nobody's running this process, so.
No one can force anybody to
Right.
go. I just in my case
Right.
feel out of respect for speaker who pointed me that I should go because her bar isn't his, you know, he runs, I just feel like that's why I need to go.
Okay, so I'm going to take us back to this. So if you want to go, it's at 9 o'clock tomorrow somewhere. It's in the letter. We're going to identify our strands. We're going to identify our clusters. And then my question was, is the next thing that we're going to do to begin to identify standards that we want to fall under those clusters? Okay, and then I feel like tomorrow, depending upon what time it is and where we are, whatever, we can say, okay, we're going to start with cluster A, strand A, cluster 1, and then, but not that way, because that'll be too confusing. And then determine what we're gonna work through. Does that sound okay? And then I guess, I mean, like that's enough because we won't get through all that tomorrow. So we would either, I want to see. I guess I want to look at your head nodding. My feeling is that it's possible tomorrow that we would do 1, 2. There's a meeting with K5, and there's lunch, and then it's really close to 3, and we don't get to number 3 on here, which is so I just want to make sure we're all okay with if it makes sense that that's where the logical break is, that's where the logical break is. We resume that on the 20th, and if it doesn't, we can dig in. We stop when there's a logical break, and we move on. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
I'm really on. But I did think about the fact that something we said when we were looking earlier at the Missouri Learning Standards. I personally am fine with the grade bands, but you and some other people are not. So if we're going to start looking at standards, should we also maybe not try to make a decision tomorrow about whether we are going to do the grade bands or do it by individual grade? It seems like that would be critical as well.
So we're going to, I'm going to write this out this way. So we'll begin to identify standards. We will determine.
6 to 8 sometimes fail. Because they don't say. Or sometimes it doesn't change.
Okay.
But it's not. If you
Is
have
that what you're
time-
saying? So we'll begin to identify standards, but part of that will be, okay, do we like the grade span thing or
And
not?
that's another one of those things that seems to me is in the same category as the strands, clusters, and then grouping. I mean, it's another grouping framework.
Okay, so I have it maybe in the wrong place, or is it okay or not?
It would be,
Okay, that's what I thought, okay. All right, and then, just to keep myself honest, okay, there will be, K, 5, and 6, 12 will meet at some point. Okay, now I have one.
Well, I know we talked about using the Massachusetts and using the South Carolina, but did we want to have copies of the Indiana to look over those as well? Or we fine with?
Our copy budget is depleted.
They were
Well,
like
last
similar
time, yeah.
copies.
So I think we would
Just look them up.
So, I'll leave. Well, oh, you never know.
Okay, so that's good for tomorrow. That's enough's enough.
Typically, right?
I don't really know. We never really talked about, do we need to vote to adjourn? Do we need to vote to adjourn, or can we do that by consensus? Well, I mean, you can just leave if you want, but I mean.
Let's give a hand to our chairman.
Yeah. So after you guys assign me more jobs, of course you're gonna, here are the jobs you have. Okay, so, tomorrow morning we'll be here at 8, right? Okay, so, gosh, it's really, it's a pleasure to be doing this work with you guys. I'm really enjoying it. Despite the tension or the stress of it all, because there is some stress here, but I do enjoy the discourse. It's very nerdy of me. It's why I have my job, but I love it. So thank you. So I hope you all have a really good evening, eat some really good food, and
Should we leave all our stuff out again? Or-
There shouldn't be anybody else in here, I just wouldn't leave your
Right.
electronics in here, but otherwise, yeah, everything should be okay.
Leave my name.
Okay, you should be